What's going on, guys? Welcome to another live hackintosh build. The reason you guys are seeing this on YouTube, if you're watching the YouTube version, is, well, because of you guys. I actually didn't even plan on uploading this because I figured it was kind of similar to my previous Ivy Bridge build, but you guys just told me you really wanted it, so now here we have another hackintosh build. So you know how my builds are. Grab some of your, your hackintosh juice or something you want to eat, kick back and relax. This video is probably going to be about 2 hours or so, and like I said, it was made possible by you guys. So what we have here is a pretty nice build for, some pretty decent video editing. This is going to be a machine that's mostly geared towards video editing. You can do some gaming on here. You can do a little bit of everything because these are pretty high-end components in terms of, the processor and things like that. Pretty, mid to high range on the GPU. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'll walk you guys through the parts and we'll get started with the build. Real quick before that, though, I do want to say that this build came to me via the RocheTechnology customized computer form. And if you go and fill that out, I can build a computer just like this for you. If you want, I can probably even do it live like this, depending on my availability. So, that's awesome if you guys want something like that. Then go ahead and definitely check out the form. Basically, what I do is I charge 15% of the hardware cost with it. That just gets added on automatically with the form. And so I think it's a pretty good deal. It really helps me out, helps out my channel, and you guys get an awesome computer. And so also, one last thing about this particular video. This is a little bit different in that I have some other people here with me. Joining me is Dontae Harris. So Dontae, go ahead and say hi. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Dontae Harris. You can find me at One Place for Apple, OnePlaceForTech.com. You can follow me on Twitter at KCNightmare. And I'm just another guy that's affiliated with Bob, and we're going to be figuring out what we're going to do with this particular Hackintosh build today. I specialize in antivirus removal, PC builds. I've done Hackintoshes myself and things like that, and mostly everything I do is custom. I'm a Mac user and love every minute of it. So, without any further ado, let's get into the build.
Awesome. And also one thing that's different is we actually now have a dedicated producer, someone that's going to be switching the cameras, making sure everything flows right. His name is Terrell Clark. I have over at One Place for Tech, One Place for Apple, tons of tech stuff there. So definitely be sure to check him out. And be sure to like the video down below just because he's doing an awesome job here. Definitely takes a lot of work to run Wirecast to make sure we get all the shots that we need. So with that said, I think we're ready to go ahead and jump into the actual build. I'm going to go ahead and list you guys out the components. And of course, if you're watching the YouTube version, we have links right down there in the description to all of these different parts. So these parts are known to work beautifully with OS X, and they're being used here. So I guess we'll just start off with, we'll go off with the processor. So I'll go ahead and zoom in the camcorder for the YouTube version. This is a Core i7 3770K. This is the top of the line Intel quad-core i7 CPUs on the 1155 chipset. We didn't go with a Haswell build just because it's not really officially supported at this time. Now, granted, there is new bootloaders and new things like that are out there. We can theoretically get Haswell chips up and running with 10.8.4, but I just for my first Haswell build, I didn't want to do it this early. In the next coming months, we're going to see a lot more support, a lot more people that ventured off and have tested hardware, things like that. And so, for this being a 3770K fully unlocked, you can overclock this thing. And I'll get into this a little bit down here, or a little bit later, but down there we have an H80i liquid cooler, so we can really push this on overclocks. And like I said, for video editing or audio production, anything like that, this CPU is definitely going to pack a pretty good punch for that. So we'll go ahead and I guess we'll just set this over here. Next, probably one of the biggest components of this build. This is the EVGA GTX 650 Ti Boost. So once again, I'll zoom into this on the YouTube version. This is going to be a pretty awesome card for gaming or video production or anything you really want to do with it. This card does pack 768 CUDA cores, which is going to be awesome for applications like Photoshop or Adobe Premiere. Really use those CUDA cores and get videos exported faster. This thing packs DisplayPort, HDMI, and 2 DVIs, so a really nice card that can handle pretty much anything you throw at it pretty well. So moving those down there, I guess just next, what's up top here, we have a TP-Link TL-WDM 4800. This is probably the best wireless card for your Hackintosh. It works right out of the box with an OS X. I mean, literally, you just put this in your PCI slot, fire up your machine, and OS X sees it as an airport card, and it just works awesome. And so my personal network is 30 down and 5 up. I have no problem reaching those speeds even on this wireless card. So very fast wireless, and everything is good. Moving next here, we'll go down here in the front. We have 16 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance memory. This is 1600 megahertz. You definitely have some really good performance out of this memory. We can overclock this a little bit if you'd like, but this is two 8 GB sticks. The motherboard down there, which I'll get to in just a second, has 4 slots on it, so we can actually upgrade that to 32 gigabytes, which is the maximum for LGA 1155. So, like I said, tons of room for expansion in the future. Really reliable memory. I've yet to have a bad stick of Vengeance, and I've seen many of these. So that's awesome reliability on Corsair's part. Moving down to this board here, we have the Z77DS3H. This is probably one of the best boards for your Hackintosh, and it comes in at a very competitive price range. This thing is like $100 from anywhere you can buy motherboards from. I actually did a Hackintosh hardware video on this board, actually that GPU as well. And this board really is awesome with OS X. It installs like no one's business, very straightforward. Everything on it's compatible almost out of the box, and tons of room for expansion. There's a good amount of PCI slots, four memory slots, and the works of a standard ATX board. So moving on a little bit farther, here we have a hard drive. This is just a Seagate 500 gigabyte hard drive. Nothing insane. This is basically just going to be used for some media or like a scratch disk or something like that. So nothing crazy here. 7,200 RPM. Nothing astronomically insane. This guy right here, once again, nothing crazy. This is just a very straightforward, DVD burner, CD burner from Asus. This is literally like 20 bucks on Newegg or wherever you can buy it. So not too much to say there. Let's see. This is just screws and stuff for the case, which I'll get into in a second. As I mentioned earlier, we have an H80i liquid cooler. This thing is going to be awesome for overclocking at 3770K. We're probably going to get up to maybe like 4.2-ish gigahertz. We can probably even push it more than that because it comes stock at 3.5. But you don't want to go too high, especially now that it's summer, and depending on where the computer is, it could get still somewhat warm. But this thing will definitely keep your CPU nice and cool even under a pretty significant load, which once again is awesome for video editing or something that's really using your CPU. Moving down here, we have a Silverstone 500-watt power supply. This is not modular. We didn't go all out, absolutely insane on the power supply, but 500 watts for this build is going to be pretty, I would say just about right. There's not crazy amounts of expansion with this. This can power 1 GPU, and so it's going to be pretty nice for this build and trying to keep the cost down. But Silverstone is definitely an awesome brand. This is actually the first power supply I've used from them, but I hear nothing but good things. So there's that. This is a 240 gigabyte SanDisk solid-state drive. We actually got this guy from Amazon. This is actually a really good deal. So here we go, 240 gigs. A couple months ago, this was actually a lot more expensive. SSD prices are definitely coming down, which is awesome to hear. A lot of people are moving to solid-state drives, myself included, obviously. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there even have SSDs nowadays. And overall, once you go to one of these, you just don't go back. I'm sure Dontae can agree. You got the data doubler in your Mac Mini, don't you, Dontae?
Yes, I have the data doubler that comes from OWC Company. Basically, what it does is it turns a regular Mac Mini. I have a 2012 Core i7 2.3 Mac Mini with just a single hard drive. It came stock with a terabyte Apple hard drive, and what it does is you have to completely dismantle your Mac Mini, and once you put the data doubler in, it gives you an extra room to fit another 2.5-inch disk on top of your existing disk. So when you take the original one, you move it to the bottom, and then take your other one and put it to the top. So I have a 120 gigabyte solid state drive from OCZ, and I have it on top of my terabyte, so it works really well. And you may notice a slight heat increase because of the compression between the air that you lose in between that space, but other than that, it works just fine, and the Mac Mini stays pretty cool, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. You just don't go back from an SSD once you've used it.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah, before you have one, like these delays with opening up applications or even your startup time, it's not a big deal. But then you use an SSD and you try to go back to that, and it's just like, why?
Right. And to me, it's like going from installing OS X from a disk and then installing on a flash drive. It's night and day. Ever since some of the different applications come out like Unibeast and things like that to make your flash drives and whatnot bootable. There's no comparison to how fast you can load your OS and how long it would actually take off an optical drive. So that's just another advance with this technology. So, definitely noticing huge speed increases. And then, later I'm going to pull that 1 terabyte out and throw another solid state in there, and I'll just run a RAID and see how fast I can really get this Mac Mini heated up. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's just awesome. I mean, I've done a RAID 0 in the past, and now what a lot of people are starting to do is they have like those PCI-based SSDs. Even like the newer MacBooks have those, and those things are just insane. Those things get
Right.
you ridiculous speeds. And another thing that's nice about building a desktop like this is you can do that. You can go out from say OWC and buy their, I think it's called the Mercury Excelsior, and
Right.
it's like
Right.
a PCI card that has two little blades in it, each blade being an SSD. It basically raids them into one, and it's all PCI based. So you're getting like a gigabyte per second read and write. I mean, it's just insane speeds. So definitely a benefit of building a big desktop like this. And also someone in the chat here saying that they have a Fusion drive. I've actually created a Fusion drive on a Hackintosh. I have a video on my channel for that. That's pretty sweet too. It'd be a good combination for what we have here, like a 240 gig SSD and a 500 gig hard drive. That's almost like 1 terabyte, and it would be running basically at the speed of that SSD for a lot of the things because we have a big solid state drive. So something to keep in mind that I have a video on that if you want to check that out. It's not that hard to do and can really definitely pack a punch in your performance. But last thing we have here, this is the Fractal Define R4 case. Tons of people I know use this case right here, and that's because one of the main things about this case is, other than looking pretty simple, looks really good, has good metal build quality, is that it's actually insulated with a noise dampening material. So we can have this big beefy cooler, this H80i, and overclock the crap out of our processor, and even though those fans are spinning real loud, this case is really going to help cut back on that ambient noise coming from your computer. So if you're doing, say, audio recording, and like how right now I have a microphone right next to this, I bet you if this computer was on and overclocked, this microphone would barely be able to pick it up, and the case is right here. So this case makes for a really quiet build, which a lot of people do love. And so let's go ahead and show this. The YouTube version, here's the front. I still have a little plastic shrink wrap on it, but this acts as like a little door, and we have our little our optical drive bay right there. And on the other side, there's really nothing there. Go ahead and I'll show the back. As you can see there, very standard of an ATX case. We have 7 little PCI, I call them gates. Some people might not, but I do. Rear looks to be a 120 millimeter fan and a bottom mounted power supply, so that's pretty sweet. And so what I'll do now, and also by the way, this is just an 8 gig flash drive. This is what we use for UniBeast. And so any 8 gig flash drive will work. Nothing crazy there. But so what I'm going to do now is take off this side panel. So here we go. And on the YouTube version, I'll go ahead and zoom in. You guys can get sort of an idea for that padding, that material, that noise dampening goodness. So you can kind of see it, squishing and compressing down like that. Very soft material, makes for a really quiet machine. So make sure we're zoomed out over here. And now what we're going to do is try to get you guys looking inside the case. So if we can get a nice switch over here to the internal. So inside this case here, we have, obviously the motherboard tray out here. You have all your ATX, micro ATX mounts. We have that 120 millimeter fan in the back up here. Our 7 little PCI cages. You guys can see this. Over here, what I was talking about earlier, those 8 hard drive bays. There's little screws here that we can remove these if we wanted to save some space to tuck cables back. Speaking of cables, this case has some awesome cable management. You can kind of see in here. All of our cables are routed back up through here. We have little grommets up here, all through the side, on the bottom. Very cool, very clean case. Up top, also, if you're still using an optical drive, which a lot of professionals are, some need to burn DVD projects and things, you also have an option for 2 of those up here. So really, it's up to you guys. I know it's going to be kind of a delay here on the YouTube version, but what do you guys want to do? Do you want to put in the motherboard first? Personally, Dontae, what do you think? Do you want to do motherboard in the case and then put the CPU on that?
Normally, I throw the motherboard in the case first, and then just kind of get a nice feel to line it up where the risers are. And if I'm not mistaken, is that a toolless case?
There's some aspects of it that are toolless. I mean, you can take out the hard drive bays, no screws needed. But if you want to say put an SSD or even like a regular hard drive on this, you do need some screws. So you have to put some screws on the hard drive bays, slide those in. But other than that, yeah, it's a really nice case. You also do need a screwdriver if you want to take off the PCI gates here in the back for when you put your GPU in. But it's not a lot of work.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and we'll do that. We'll go ahead and we'll break the motherboard out. And so once again, we have the DS3H mount, like so. And I guess what we'll do is we'll slide this case upwards. And then if we can just keep the camera down here, I'll try to unbox this as good as I can down here. Okay, so then in the box we have our little rear I/O shield, nothing crazy. We're given 2 SATA cables. We have all of our awesome, instruction manuals and our little gigabyte sticker for the front of our case. Moving past that, now we have the actual board itself. Yeah, ban OS 1086. Some people do put power supply first. In my experience, it just kind of gets cluttered in there with all the little wires hanging off it. Even if it's a modular supply, you still have some cables there. So I tend to just keep the wires out of the way until I basically can, which is like the last step.
I agree, and I'm one of those sticklers for having. I believe maybe I have OCD or something when it comes to wiring because I keep lots of tiny zip ties handy and tiebacks and things like that, and prefer cases where they have better cable management because of things like that. And then also, say if you have a case that may have a clear side or something, you can show off the guts of your computer a lot better once the cables are managed a lot better on the inside of the case. Now that's why I normally put in the motherboard first, and then I can kind of reroute the cables where I see fit, depending on what I want to do. And sometimes, you may have a power supply that's mounted on top or the bottom, and most of them are mounted on the top, but now newer designs of cases with the ATX form factor are mounted on the bottom, so that may take a different approach to your cable management. So it just gives you time to kind of feel around, have things, plugged in, your processor, your RAM, things like that, before you go ahead and zero in on those cables to figure out where you want them tied back.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it kind of depends how expensive you go with your case, because I think it was my Ivy Bridge build video where I actually looked ahead and I wanted to put my power supply first because I noticed that because in case you guys don't know, Terrell, if you could switch to this view down here on this motherboard, there's actually a little CPU power fan, or a power connector up here, and that's at the very top of the board and the power supply is at the bottom. And so instead of having to reach that cable of the power supply all the way up through the bottom like that, up to the top, if you go behind the motherboard, you can have it poke out a little hole at the top and connect like that, so that whole cable is hidden by the board. So I had to route that cable first and then put the board on top of it and then put the connector. So now there's some rare scenarios where you do want to put the power supply first that actually makes it a little bit easier. But in general, if you spend about $100 on a case or more, that the manufacturer is going to think of things like that. And so then you typically don't even have to do that. But so moving right on with the board here. Here's the DS3H. I'll go ahead and zoom in on the camcorder for the YouTube version. And then we'll try to show this to the live viewers on this camera here in a minute. But here you guys go for the YouTube version. Like I said, there's 4 memory slots. That CPU socket in the middle, LGA 1155, i3, i5, and i7. We have a dual 8-pin, 2 4-pin CPU power connector, so that really will help with higher overclocks, get more power to that CPU. As you can see down there, we have a ton of PCI options. We have 2 PCI Express 16 slots, 2 PCI 1X slots, and 2 legacy PCI slots. So pretty much something for everybody there. Standard 24-pin ATX connector. I believe an ALC 892 audio chipset. I'm not sure off the top of my head. We'll look into that a little bit later. But here you go for the live viewers. Try to show it off a little bit more there, get you guys a better look at it. But definitely a really nice board. Like I said, $100 can buy you one of the best Hackintosh boards on the market. There are higher end boards that cost more money. But if you guys just need a pretty, like a mid-range video editing PC, something that can have an i7, a couple good GPUs or something like that, this is going to be a really, really nice choice for you and a good choice for your wallet as well. So what we have to do to actually get this mounted in the case is look for the appropriate screws. And so, whenever you get a case, it comes with a ton of little screws. You kind of got to figure out which ones are for the motherboard mount. And actually, wow, this is it's labeled. That's crazy. I hope you guys can read that. Screws to secure HDD trays, optional. There's actually a sticker on there. It's actually labeled. How nice, a fractal. I've never seen that. That's actually pretty awesome. Oh, never mind. They skimmed out. That's like the only one that's labeled. All right, so here we have on this camera here, you guys can see that we have like the little motherboard standoffs. So there's those. So we'll need those, and then also, I would say these right here are the motherboard screws, but really these look about the same size. So we'll just do some trial and error. So the first thing that we're going to do to install this motherboard here is to actually screw these little mounts into the case. Some cases do this for you, but some don't. This is a case in which they didn't. So we're going to have to go and do that, and I'll move this board up here for now. I should probably move all these screws out of the way. Alright, so I'm going to try to give you guys as good of a look in this case as I possibly can. And so here we have those little screws. And so you probably can't see it in the video, but there's a little A/M. That stands for ATX/micro ATX. So most cases are labeled like that. So if you have an ATX motherboard, which is what we have here, it'll actually let you know what screws to put these little mounts in, or which holes rather. And I like the 6 out of the 9 for ATX are the same as micro ATX, so they're pretty similar. Ooh, you're having issues getting 10.5.6. That's a long time ago, man. It really depends what hardware you're running, but the more recent versions of OS 10, it's like the more recent it is, the more Hackintosh friendly it is, because the hardware's gotten more and more similar on both sides over the years. Both sides being Mac and PC. So, I mean, if you're trying to get Leopard running, you're going to need some older hardware.
David Boggs have a good comment. It says, don't forget to see if you need to take out the case fan because of the water cooler. That may be something that somebody who may be doing a first-time build or someone who's not sure of the dimensions may want to check first. And also, if it's your first build or your first time, don't be afraid to take your screws out first and just see, kind of, with your hands and without the board being inside first to see which ones line up. And of course, usually the screws you shouldn't have to force in very much, and if obviously if they're too big, you just check them out one by one. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Even, using anti-static wrist strap, things like that, to prevent ESD, things like that, having the proper tools and preventing stripping at all possible when you're installing your risers and things like that. Because I've seen a guy one time, his risers, they weren't going in the right way, so he went and got a pair of pliers. Well, then he stripped the screw hole that it came in. Well, he didn't realize that those particular risers already were in the case. I mean, they were already mounted, so he was putting them on top of risers that were already in there, and he didn't realize it. So, well, after that, it ended up being a big fiasco, and he had to buy a new case. So it was things like that. So just another safety precaution if it's your first time build, and most of you on here, it probably isn't, but just in case, I mean, you can always be safe than sorry.
Yeah, you should always be, careful at least. And I mean, I've never had any deals, like any problems with any kind of static, like any kind of ESD or anything, but that's not saying that it can't happen. So, I mean, you should always be careful. I mean, if you're building the computer, you're pretty safe, but that doesn't mean you can go wear slippers and rub your feet on the carpet, just to be dangerous. So, I mean, whenever you're dealing with any kind of electronics, you do have to be pretty careful. But man, I cannot seem to get a couple of these in. It's just like, it's a weird angle for my arm. And by the way, guys, it is seriously like at least 100 degrees in this room right now. It's currently like 90 degrees outside, and plus I'm upstairs in a small apartment. So yeah, I'm pretty hot. So like the video for dedication. Unlike Dontae, which is in a nice basement with AC.
Oh man, it's nice and cool. My Mac Mini is running at 48 degrees Celsius right now. That's pretty good.
Yeah, man. And I have a pretty beefy cooler. I have a Scythe Mugen 2 air cooler on my main Hackintosh. And my CPU is older. It's 2.9 gigahertz, so it's a pretty low frequency by today's standards. Not overclocked or anything. Right now, just idle, it's running like 56. It's so hot up here. So yeah, the ambient temperature of the room it could influence your buying decision on what kind of cooler you get. especially if you're the kind of person like me that I'm upstairs in this crazy weather, plus I'm editing video, have my CPU up, then you need a cooler that can keep up with that. Don't try to use the stock cooler for that. And actually, I think what I'm going to do really quick, I'm going to take just a split-second break and go grab a bottle of water. So yeah, I mean, if there's some chat room questions, then feel free to entertain those. But I will be back in like 30 seconds.
And also, I see that I know a lot of you users are complaining about the audio, and we are working on that audio for some reason. People say they've been only be able to get audio out of the left channel, and others have been saying the right channel. And we're currently working on that. We're trying to find a solution to fix that problem, and hopefully we'll have that problem fixed here shortly. Maybe not within this particular live cast, but maybe on our next show. And then also, you guys can check us out with our weekly web episodes of Tech Habit Weekly. And if you haven't already, you know, if you like this video so far, what Bob has done, and the future videos that he'll have, just hit the like button and subscribe, definitely. And also, for a second, I want to talk to you guys about the Summer Mac bundle that we have featuring Parallels 8. This is a Mac bundle that comes through Stack Social, and it's a very good app bundle package that features Parallels 8. And I actually own Parallels 8, and I can tell you right now that it is a virtual machine app where you can run Windows, Linux. I mean, I have a Windows 8 virtual machine, and this particular software, I don't know if you guys can see it out there, it's $79.99 retail, and that particular bundle is a bundle of 10 apps, and you get all 10 of those apps for $49.99, and that's pretty good for Mac apps, because we all know that Mac apps cost a little more money and things like that. So Stack Social, check it out. Tech Habit Weekly, things like that. Follow us at Twitter, and I'll take it back to Bob.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Check out Parallels 8. I mean, I use that all the time. Whether it's trying to fire up like a Windows video converter, or whether I want to kick back and play some GTA San Andreas. I can do it all on a Mac. Well, technically a Hackintosh, but OS 10 and Windows side by side, absolutely awesome. So yes, actually, I am back. I got my screwdrivers. I got my water. And so we're ready to proceed with the build. So thank you guys for holding on for a second. And let's go ahead and move on. So we do have all the motherboard mounts finally installed. And now what we're going to do is try to distinguish which of these screws belong in those mounts. I think it's these guys here. Let's see, 2, 4, 6. It looks like there's 9, which is how many of the motherboard mounts we used. So I would assume these would be 9. Yep, these ones line up perfectly, so we're going to continue to use these. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to crack open the rear I/O shield of the motherboard, which, if I can find it, that'd be cool. We have to go on a slight scavenger hunt. I really don't know where I put it. All right, I spy. Who sees the rear I/O shield? What did I do with it?
I spy something silver.
Exactly. Oh, I see it. All right, we're good. I win. All right, so we're going to crack open this rear I/O shield here. And then you'll notice that in the back of every computer case, there's like a little rectangle cutout. And if you look down here on this camera here, you'll notice that there's like this little circle here. Pretty much every motherboard has that. That's like a classic PS2 port. A lot of people like to use that for their older like mechanical keyboards and things like that. So that's always at the top. That's always at the top, so that's a good guide. But you can also, if you don't know what these are, you can look at the motherboard right side up and see where it lines up. But this one happens to go with this at the top. So we're simply just going to take it from the inside and then line it up. And once it's lined up, you just go ahead and make sure it makes a satisfying clicking sound. And once you got all 4 corners in, you should be good. Like it is so. Alright, and actually, yes, that comment earlier about this fan actually is going to come off. Depending on your cooler, you could probably leave it on, but the fan that we're going to be using, it's going to need to come off And actually the fan itself could probably stay, but the reason I have to take off these screws, because we have to use the ones that came with the cooler. And so how it is right now, the way they have that fan oriented, the cable that plugs into the motherboard to actually power the fan is in the way. So I'm just going to remove this fan altogether for now. And it's definitely something to keep in mind when you're building the computer, is to really pay attention to everything. You know, making sure that, I mean, depending on how big of a cooler you have, making sure that it's going to clear all of your components, making sure it's going to clear your memory. I mean, it's a lot to consider. You really have to research the dimensions of your case, the dimensions of your parts, and make sure that they all fall in line. Because there's nothing worse when you go to build your computer after you waited like a week for all your components to arrive. Then you go to build it, and then you find out you have to send something back. It's the worst feeling in the world, so stay away from that.
Right, and I have a funny story about that. There was a particular customer that he had his parts shipped directly to me to build, and he didn't understand that his CPU cooler was so tall that the shield to his case couldn't shut properly. And that's just, a perfect example. And what's funny is it was only off by maybe, I say, a good 3 to 4 centimeters. So not very much, but just enough to where the side couldn't come on. So he ended up having to buy a new case, and that just helps to kind of prevent those things. And and usually when you're buying something like a case or something online, the dimensions are on the websites. Usually you can check in the specifications area and see kind of the height and depth of things. And I know people may not remember it all the time, but it's always good to have that experience to check those things, because you may run into problems later, like Bob said, run into things to where things don't fit properly, and you may have to make modifications, things like that, to try to prevent those as much as possible. Is always a good measure to take.
Yep. What a lot of people, their big mistake is that, like you said, it was barely off. It was off maybe like 2 or 3 centimeters, but that's enough where some people are like, I'll just force it, and then they break stuff. So,
Right, or run into a tremendous
fit,
amount of heat, going to the side of the case. I mean, just think if that side was made of plexiglass or acrylic or something. You're like, let's just jam it on, and then you get it to fit, and then you realize you're heating the side of your case up so much that it warps your plastic. So it could turn into a small fix, and could turn into a big problem very easily.
Yeah, yeah. Just be careful. That's the moral of our story. All right, so now what we're going to do is, I'm not sure exactly how well you guys can see this. This camera can't really zoom, but trust me, it's here. There's this hole in the motherboard. That lines up with those motherboard mounts. So now we have our trusty screwdriver here. And so we're going to push the board, and then we're going to make sure it's lined up, and then just try to screw it in, make sure it's all lined up. And we're going to do that 9 times, one for each screw in the board, just to make sure that it's in there. Because, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, is that once you put, your CPU in there, your CPU cooler, a GPU, that board gets heavy, and it will have weight on it. And then when you stand up your case, if all of your screws aren't in securely, your motherboard is going to fall. That's not good. So, I mean, make sure that you take the time. Don't over-tighten the screws, because as Dontae was saying earlier, it's very possible, if you get like a set of pliers or something, it's easy to over-tighten these things, and then you break the whole hole off. So make sure that you tighten it, but don't overdo it. Don't hulk it. Just make sure it's snug. Okay. So then, and another thing too is over the years I've been doing this, all 9 of these motherboard holes probably aren't going to line up right away. Typically what you do is you kind of have to force the first one. You got to put some pressure on the board, make sure it lines up. But as you continue to do it, the board just tends to line itself up better with the rest of the screws. So if at first not everything lines up by having the board sit there, just as you put in one screw, you put in another, it kind of just warps itself and gets lined up right. So something to keep in mind. And actually something I've noticed about this board is that this isn't using. This, like up here in this top right corner, this board doesn't have a hole for a screw, so it only has 2 up top and 2 at the bottom. Whereas, and you can probably actually kind of see it over here. You have some extra mounts, and there's no actual holes over in this case, so this board just doesn't need them, which is nice. More screws for you.
I Create 922 actually has a pretty interesting question. Wants to know, have you ever built any dual xenon Hackintoshes?
Actually, I have. I have a video on my channel I did a live build just like this, but unfortunately, I shipped my phone away and all my iPhone footage got deleted. But I have some videos on my channel of like an overview of the hardware and some benchmarks. The build is called Mufasa. And what Mufasa was a dual Xeon 48 gigabyte of RAM GTX 690 build. It was a very nice build. It was very fun to build. And yeah, I definitely have some, I think I have 2 videos on my channel about that particular build. So knock yourself out on those. Unfortunately, though, it was socket 1366, which isn't a bad socket. It's the same socket that the Mac Pros are on, at least the correct cheese grater ones. So it wasn't like a socket 2011 build, but trust me, 24 threads of processing power was pretty sweet. And by the way, that particular user also did run OS 10 on it. It was a Hackintosh, and his main thing was pretty much like this, for Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop, the whole Adobe suite. And so the GTX 690 had tons and tons of CUDA cores on it, which was really awesome for that. But Dontae, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your Hackintosh history. I mean, have you built any Hackintoshes? How many? What kind?
Oh, wow. Let's see. Currently, trying to think how many up to date. Personally, for myself, I've built probably 3 different Hackintoshes. Oh, maybe 4. Myself and Terrell, we both started off doing Dell Mini 10 Hackintoshes. Now, these were some time ago. They were snow leopard Hackintoshes on a Dell Mini 10. Those had single core Intel Atom processors, and those things were pretty cool to have a netbook running OS 10. And I thought that was pretty cool. But my first actual Hackintosh, that build didn't go very well at all. I was just so happy to get to the actual startup screen and was able to install some things. It was actually was an AMD build, and I didn't have USB devices and things like that. I mean, there was a lot of research I needed to do in between that time by first starting off. But the best build that I had was my I'm sorry, not Ivy Bridge, my Sandy Bridge build. I had a Intel Core i5 2500K Sandy Bridge build, and it had 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance RAM at 1600 megahertz. I mean, the thing, honestly, for having the mid-range processor, that thing was a beast. I loved it. It was inside an Alienware case. I mean, everything worked on it. I mean, my video, I had a 6870 video card by Gigabyte with the 3 fans on it, and that thing was nice. I ran all my virtual machines and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas inside my Windows 7 virtual machine, so I was able to mod that. And a lot of people, if you're doing this for your first time, I would say don't be discouraged. There's a lot of different guides and whatnot on there, and these how-to videos are great. And Bob, I know that you specialize in these things too, so they can find a lot of information on your channel. And if you guys think this is something you guys want to do in the future, definitely subscribe to Bob's channel, and you will see a lot of great how-to videos on there on how to prevent certain things. And then there's custom Mac buy guides that tell you exactly what pieces to buy for your particular Hackintosh build, and it's all preference. If you are a user that wants to game more, there's different builds for that, and of course, to do more is going to cost more. But then there's budget Hackintosh builds as well. So it's pretty easy, I believe. I mean, it used to be pretty hard back in the day, back when Snow Leopard and things like that. But with Mountain Lion and things like that, right now, it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. Once you basically get all the hardware installation yourself, the software is pretty easy as well, and it's pretty self-explanatory, even for a first-time Hackintosh user. And there's a lot of guides out there, a lot of videos on Bob's channel, and I think it all works great to be able to basically build something cheaper than a Mac that outperforms an actual Mac. And that was the best thing. I had more control over my machine than anything, and I thought it was great. And then it's not exactly proprietary. You're not stuck with that particular build. You can upgrade that build. I mean, there's different parameters that you can upgrade in between your version of motherboard and processor and things like that. Whereas if you had bought an iMac or something like that, you're pretty much stuck. And to get to certain specs, you have to order that way in. You can't go to your local electronics store to get some of the beefier iMacs and Mac Pros and things like that. Those have to be on a special order. But with a Hackintosh, you can build and upgrade as you please and not lose any functionality with Mac OS. And as far as my last build went, everything worked perfectly fine. I mean, I bought my Magic Mouse, my trackpad, and Bluetooth keyboard, and everything just connected to it fine. I mean, I was able to, iMessage, on cloud, everything worked great on it. And I feel that if anybody wants to do this, I say just try it. I mean, there's some budget builds out there that'll only cost you a few $100, and I think it's definitely worth a try, even for just a learning experience. If you want to use Mac OS without having to fork out a ton of money by buying Apple products, I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I've been running my Hackintosh for almost 3 years now, and it's seen 4 OSs. It's seen Snow Leopard, Lion, Mountain Lion, and I've even installed Mavericks on it. All of which, every single OS, I've had everything working perfectly. Everything all the way back from 10.6, with just, Ethernet, wireless, audio, anything like that. It all worked great. Once you move to the Leopard or Lion and Mountain Lion, messages work great. I mean, I've really rarely had a problem with my machine. It's been a workhorse for coming up on 3 years now. It's getting kind of dated. It's running first generation hardware. But I mean, like you say, it's allowed me to not only learn a lot about computers, how Mac OS 10 works, but I mean about computers in general. And it's gotten me to that point where I'm pretty fluid with pretty much any OS. I've learned even a lot about Linux in the time that I've built this machine, or that machine down there rather. And like what you mentioned about having control over your computer, some people, a Mac is great because they don't want to know what's on the inside. They don't want to have to worry about switching hardware stuff out. But for the people like me that love doing that stuff, it's really, really cool that you can get in there, customize stuff, and still be able to run Mac OS. And now that Apple is cutting off their cheese grater Mac Pro and replacing it with something that really isn't upgradable, I made a whole video on this. I still think the Hackintosh is the best way to go for hardcore geeks like myself, and I'm sure most of you guys.
Oh, definitely. And then also you have to realize that with a Hackintosh, just say for some reason you're just not comfortable with Mac OS, maybe it's just not your cup of tea. Guess what? You can turn it right back into a Windows PC easily. You just reinstall operating system, format the hard drive, you're good to go. And that's just right out the box, and yeah, this is more advanced type of computing here, but you can get a lot of computing out of these Hackintoshes, and now they've become very stable systems. There used to be to the point where maybe some video drivers and KEX and things wouldn't work very well, or certain devices wouldn't connect to it. But now that the Hackintosh community as a whole has grown so much that you pretty much have legit Macs sitting on your desktop that's just encased in a custom case, and all the parts work. There's a lot of things that you can do, a lot of expansion, and like you say, with the Wi-Fi cards and things like that, where if anyone else came over, they wouldn't even know a difference in between which is which. And then also you can do like I've done. I had my Hackintosh build running on a SSD. Well, then also I had my legit Windows hard drive also in there, so I could do one of two things. Either I could just unhook a cable, or just choose to boot into it as a secondary drive. Because of the bootloader, you can get into different hard drives and things like that. And I had a legit Windows boot if I wanted to. Now, if I didn't want to do it that way, I could run it virtually, and it worked just the same, and if not better, because I always like to be booted into my Mac OS while dealing with my Windows virtual machines. That way I can switch different files between different hard drives, my Mac formatted hard drives versus my NTFS Windows formatted hard drives and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Hackintosh is definitely, I would say, the most free choice for users. It gives their users that computer the most choice. You can decide what OS you want to run. Whatever you put on there is going to work great. I mean, it's not like Apple, and what a lot of people don't like about Apple is just how controlled it is. This is probably the least controlled computer you'll ever buy, and also not only for and I guess the way I word it is it's the best price to performance ratio you're going to find. It's the most open computer, but for what you pay, you also get the most power out of it as well.
Brando Berg has a good question here, and he was wondering, what about a Hackintosh laptop? Now, before you answer that, Bob, I can give my experience with it. I used to have an old Dell 1545 laptop that I turned into a Hackintosh, and actually, that build actually went pretty good. All the guides that I found on it was actually for a Dell 1525, so I had to kind of piece together a few tutorials to get everything to work right, but it worked just fine. I mean, my Wi-Fi and everything worked just fine, Ethernet, and it was a pretty good build. And also, I know that Terrell just recently did a Lenovo, and this was like a pretty good machine. This particular Lenovo laptop was maxed out at 32 gigs of RAM, compatible with it. So it actually had four RAM slots in this particular build, and that thing was nice. I mean, I couldn't believe that was such a beast of a computer. But he just did that hackintosh build on a laptop. So there are possible. Now, from my experience, they are a tad bit harder to do than a desktop, because once laptops are pretty much made, they're pretty much proprietary. You can, switch out some of the expansion things, USB devices, and, maybe Bluetooth or wireless in cards and things like that. But sometimes laptop Hackintoshes are harder because not everything already manufactured in the laptop is compatible with Mac OS and Mac standard. So you may run into things where your Wi-Fi doesn't work, but everything else works just fine, and that's just in my experience.
Yeah, and that's basically why I tend to not recommend Hackintosh laptops, and that's, you can't change anything. I mean, if everything, in my opinion, Mac OS 10 is extremely gesture based. I mean, you're going to get the best if you can use the gestures. You're going to get the best experience. And from what I understand, most laptop trackpads can do very, very basic gestures like two-finger scroll and stuff. And so, like having a less than stellar trackpad on OS 10, for me, and I would assume for a lot of people, would kind of ruin the experience. But if you're a person that doesn't mind having a bad, trackpad, or maybe having to go out and scour Google for some kind of like a USB Wi-Fi solution, or if you want to do like more research, make sure everything is compatible, then it could be a really fun experiment. And if you do your homework right, it could be a really fun and sturdy, straightforward experiment. But I mean, and me personally, the best laptop that runs OS 10 is a MacBook. I mean, they are really, really nice machines. They're well built. They last a long time. And I mean, if I would definitely buy a Hackintosh before I would buy like an Apple desktop. But when it comes to a laptop, I would absolutely buy a MacBook before I buy any other laptop and try to Hackintosh it. But that's just me. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do now is being finicky with this CPU cooler bracket. And it doesn't seem to want to line up quite right. I have 3 out of the 4 lined up, but one of them just doesn't want to go in. So we're going to try to see. It just seems that it doesn't want to slide freely. I think I may have finally gotten it here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this, then I'll show you guys exactly what I'm doing. I just want to be sure that it doesn't move on me here. And I will say that if you guys have seen any of my other previous builds, like the 6-core build I did, the Socket 2011 build, I used the same cooler, but the installation was a tad bit different, because on those motherboards, you don't have to use this back bracket. It's basically already built into the board for you. But since this is an LG 1155 build, and I'll go ahead and I'll show the main camera here, and you guys just saw it on this camera, is that this cutout right here that is free, that you can do that. Not all cases have that. Most of them do nowadays because a lot of people use aftermarket cooling solutions, but not too long ago, a lot of cases didn't have this. And so because I put the motherboard in before I put this bracket on, if this wasn't here, then I would have had to pull the motherboard, do it, and then put the board back in. So it's very cool. I mean, if you're going to be using an aftermarket solution like that, make sure your case has a back bracket like that, because it does make your life a lot easier. So I'll go ahead and I'll try to flip this machine down and show you guys this as good as I can. But now for this cooler here, I'm going to try to focus this down. We have these screws here, and I hope this camera can focus a little bit. So we have that screw there. I've already actually installed 2 of them, but so they're basically just one that goes on every corner of it, and then we put the actual cooler on top of that and secure it all down. So now that that back bracket is in, these will keep it in place. So all those are now screwed in. All Alright, so now I guess we're just going to do the CPU now that those are all in place. So I'll go ahead and crank out the CPU here. And once again, in case you missed it, we're rocking a 3770K here. Probably the best quad-core CPU on the market. At least like the most Hackintosh friendly, I would say. I mean, you can go like LGA 2011 and get some quad-core options, but I honestly don't really see why you would do that unless you really want you want more than 32 gigs of RAM, you want more PCI options, things like that. But for the average person that's going to be building a Hackintosh, I think this is the best processor to go if you really want some performance. So opening the box here. So we have our awesome, manual and the classic Intel sticker that I never put on my case, but some people might. And now here's the actual CPU itself, in case you guys have never seen one, which I'm sure all of you watching this live have. But if you haven't, there's the CPU. And then what we're not going to be using for this build, I'll show you guys anyway, is the actual CPU fan. This is the stock fan. Don't use this if you're going to do video production or anything like that, because you will eat up that CPU. You'll really, really see some temperatures that you don't want. Especially once you get that CPU revved up and using 80 or 90% of it. So we're going to set that aside for now. And basically how you go about installing the CPU, hopefully you guys can see this. What we're going to do, there's like a little lever here that basically what you do is you push down on it. The whole thing flips up. And now there's a little plastic thing that says, note, please keep this around, because if you need to keep this motherboard or if something's wrong with it, you need to send it back. If you don't have this in there, they're not going to take it because that could damage the actual socket. And so here is the actual processor. And one thing you don't want to do is touch the top surface of this, because that's going to really affect your cooling, because the natural oil from your fingers is going to get on there. It's going to affect your cooling big time. So here's the CPU. Hopefully it can focus on some of that text that I know is on there. And so if you can see it, up near the top here and over here, there's actually two little notches. Those correspond to two little notches in here on the motherboard. So that lets you know that you're going to install it right. So how you grab the CPU is just like this. There's actually like little two places on here where you can put your fingers to prevent touching the top surface of it. So here's your CPU. And now really quick, we're going to look down and we're going to see that this is the correct way to go. It doesn't go like this, it doesn't go like this. It goes straight down like this. And then once it's in there, that's all you have to do. That's it. You literally just place it in there. And it's not like AMD where the pins are actually on the processor. The pins are on the motherboard on Intel, and then the CPU sits on the pins. So AMD is different. I feel like this is a better way to go. It's a lot harder to bend a pin if it's in the motherboard rather than on the CPU. So you do what I did there. You just take that, the little lever, you push it down, secure it. You should hear some kind of a noise come out of it that lets you know it's seated right, but that's good. A little bit of pressure is good, but like I said, don't work it, don't wrench it, don't overdo it, because that could be bad. And so that's how you install a processor. Pretty straightforward, but you do have to be careful. That could be said with a lot of different things about building a computer. But now what we're going to do here, sorry for the on cam, is we're going to go ahead and install the liquid CPU cooler. Once again, this is the Corsair H80i. Dontae, do you have any experience with like a liquid versus an air cooler solution?
I actually haven't. That was one of the realms that I kind of shied away from, only because I've heard a few horror stories in my life, and I'm like, I've always been able to keep my custom builds pretty cool without an intercooler of that capacity. So I haven't had any experience with it. I'm definitely more likely going to do it on my next build, but I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, I have little to no experience with it. I was just nervous about the whole thing. I knew a guy that got a pretty bad water leak inside his water cooler, and then another guy poked a hole in his radiator and things like that. And I was like, well, once I actually need something that performs that much and gets that hot and needs to be cooled down, then I'll definitely jump into it. But as far as myself personally, no.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I mean, this stuff's expensive. I mean, if liquid cooling solution gets on your motherboard, depending on where it gets, you're probably going to need to buy a new motherboard. If it gets on your CPU, you're probably going to need to buy a new CPU. So you definitely have to be careful with it. And there's just some companies out there that if they make a liquid cooler, I would never buy it. Every single liquid cooling solution I've ever got from Corsair has been very good. Corsair is a very reputable brand when it comes to this stuff. but accidents happen to even the best companies. I mean, Apple makes awesome computers, but every once in a while there's a DOA MacBook. So it's always possible, and I definitely see the concern. And like that Mac Mini you have there, that cooling system has been specifically engineered by Apple, so it probably won't be as big of a deal. But then you start working with custom builds. Every motherboard you put in here, every stick of RAM could affect cooling. So if you're doing like high-end video work, you can definitely see the benefit of a liquid cooler if that CPU's up at 100%.
Definitely. And then, you get people that may, do a lot of, let's just say, movie rendering and things like that. And I don't know if anyone uses the program Handbrake to convert videos and things like that to different formats. Well, if you haven't noticed, your CPU starts to work really hard. And if you had a program called iStat menus where you can monitor your CPU usage, it goes through the roof, and you notice immediately that through the heat sensor that's built into iStat menu 2, your processor generates a lot of heat. So just think if you were gaming on a huge load and, say that you have 3 monitors set up or something and you're playing a game on full settings and you're just cranking it out and you're not really thinking about how hot that CPU has to get to process this. Now, also you have to realize that even on my Mac Mini, there's no dedicated graphics card. It's running off the chip. So that also makes it more stress on your processor as well. So watching the coolant and cooling, at least, is one of the things I was always worried about. But just like, I see a user here in the chat saying that, they've always been afraid to have liquid cooling in their machines, and I'm right along with them. And I feel like I'm not a novice when it comes to computers and building and, coolant systems and things like that. I've always just added more fans if I needed it that bad. And now you can get fans that have pretty low decibels. So, even though you have a lot of them going, some of them just have a light hum to it instead of, sounding like you've got a room full of, box fans and things like that. I've heard certain computers that sound like a jet engine, and then other ones you're not sure if it's asleep or if it's on, and it's with the same type of fans, and yeah, you're going to spend a little bit more for those fans, but I found that, you can get a good 120 millimeter fan for about 12 to 13 bucks that has pretty low decibels and, and sounds really good and gives you really good airflow. And then you have to kind of go into, if you like to have a wind tunnel system, pulling air in to suck air out, depending on your case and things like that, that would help as well. And then also not having your case sit on the floor or on carpet or something like that. Keep it elevated in a place where it's wide open, where air can circulate pretty good, and you shouldn't have any problems doing those graphically intense games and video rendering and things like that, the things that are actually going to hurt your processor and make that processor do what it's there to do.
Yeah, definitely. And even if you do not, like, if you choose not to invest in those like more expensive, quieter fans, you get a case like this. It's pretty quiet anyway. So I mean, the cooling solution you choose for your computer really is up to you. There's many choices. There's many air coolers from many companies. There's many liquid coolers from many companies. If you don't think you're going to be, running your CPU at max temperatures for a long time in a pretty warm room, then there's no need to go out and I guess take that risk with a liquid cooler. But for some people, it could benefit a lot more than others. So really,
right.
Go with your brain. Go with your gut on what you think you need for a cooling solution.
Right, and like you were saying with that particular case, if the case has a good insulation, I mean, on the inside of it, then you can have higher decibel fans, and it won't really matter because the insulation in the case, once the case is closed up, you won't really be able to hear those fans, give you any annoyance or any problems to where you're like, oh my gosh, I can hear that fan over the video I'm watching or something like that. Yeah. So that's definitely out there, and a lot more case manufacturers are looking at that as far as being able to customize things and have them quieter and things like that. So they're only going to get better from here, with the insulation of the things and being able to route wires a lot better. And, there's a lot more implementation of those things on cases now. So we'll see a lot more of that in the future. And I think it's great.
Yeah, and like I said, it really just depends on the kind of user you are. All right, so what we're doing now is we're installing this radiator for this liquid cooler. And how this works is there's a fan here, and then we have the actual radiator, and there's also going to be a fan on this side too. And the way I'm going to have it is, and this totally depends on the way you want to do it. Some people tend to have the radiator as an intake, and Me personally, I'm going to have it as an outtake. And the reason for that is because this case, and because now this cooler came with 2 fans, I have an extra. So what I can do is take that extra fan, put it in the front here, and now this already has a fan up here. So this case can have 2 fans as an intake to cool your hard drives and move air coming this way across the build. So this whole front is going to be an intake. And so then I can also have a fan up top here being an output, and have this whole radiator being an output. So I really hope to have an airflow kind of coming in from here, moving up and out this way. So that's my personal opinion on how I guess my take on how I'm going to do cooling on this build. But once again, even the direction that you want the air to move in a custom build is up to you. And that's one of the reasons that makes building your own computers so fun. You know, you can have it work, even cool the way that you think is best. And you know what, some people, they never even want to have to worry about that stuff. And so then if that's not the kind of person you are, then you know, you should really kind of consider if you want to do a custom build or if you want to have something built for you. Right, so then this guy looks to be just about installed, at least the 2 diagonal ones. And once again, this goes for the same as any other screws in a computer build. Don't over tighten them. Just make sure they're snug. Make sure they're not going anywhere. Make sure that you can transport them, like transport them in your car, take it to a friend's house, and it's not going to fall apart on you. But don't overdo it because you will strip your screw and or like the actual hole that it goes into. And trust me, that's something that you just don't want. Because then you'll have a part that's loose in there forever. It'll be jiggling around and it's just not fun. I think I'm going to have to go over to this side to actually see. Now try to tilt this computer so you guys can see it a little better. Hopefully that helps. We're going to do what we can, yeah? But yeah, tell us in the comments or in the chat room if you're watching this live, what kind of cooling solution do you use? I mean, if you use a liquid cooler, tell us what kind, your experiences with it. If you use an air cooler, tell us why, your experiences with it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then of course let us know in the comments.
And then also, guys, if you guys are maybe afraid that you may mess something up, you know, also go to RocheTechnology.com/services, and he will actually build your computer for you, and
just
you know,
like
for
this.
a fee, of course. And you can check, and maybe your build can be actually featured on a next live build or something like that. So please feel free to check that out and go through his form and see exactly what you want to do and the different custom Mac builds that you want to do. And just like this here, it's completely custom, you know, and that's a safe way if you want to try it, but you're just not sure. Maybe maybe you could do the software part pretty good, but your hardware maybe not so up to par. Or if you just want the entire build to have a fresh install on it, just contact Bob and he can take care of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps out the channel too, because like if I can do a live build like this, yeah, of course I get a couple dollars in my pocket. We have fun doing it, but also you guys can watch it. It's content for you guys. And so this is the second live Ivy Bridge build I've done. I would love to have a second Socket 2011 build done. So I mean, if you're considering a Socket 2011 build, I'd love to build it for you. And basically, what my pricing model is I take the price of the hardware. Say for example, you want a $1,000 computer or something. I charge 15% of that to actually build it. So if you have a $1,000 computer, then I'll charge $150 to build it. And so, I think it's pretty fair. I know what I'm doing. I'm pretty careful with what I'm doing, and I've built a lot of computers in my day. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to rip you off. I value my online presence very, very much. I'm not going to rip anybody off or anything, so no worries there. But it provides you guys with content. It gives me, being a college student, some extra dollars in my pocket, which I can always use. A couple of people may know on Twitter my car's engine just blew, so always having those college expenses and stuff, so of course it helps me out, but most importantly, it's fun for you guys too. So RocheTechnology.com/customize if you're interested, and have at it. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to mount this second fan here. Actually, I think what I'm going to do first is actually mount the CPU block on there, because as we're doing this, it's possible that CPU is having some dust collect on it, even just dust that's in the air that you really can't avoid. You want to make sure that you keep that CPU as clean as possible, so we're going to actually put the CPU block on. And so now what we need for that is this guy right here. I'll try to zoom in. This is the little bracket, I guess you can call it, that goes on top of the cooler. And I'll try to bring up this cooler. Now it's not going to quite make it. I don't want to put too much tension on the radiator. But this basically just sits down on there. And I guess if you're not already, switch down to this camera here, and hopefully you can see this a tad better. So this, as you can see right here, this we already have the thermal paste applied, so that's awesome. There's no need to go out and buy a little syringe of thermal paste. And that, of course, depends on the cooler that you buy. You know, some people, some manufacturers might not pre-apply this. So it's nice that Corsair does. But so what we're going to do then is simply remove this guy. I always like to make sure that the Corsair logo is facing the appropriate way, so that's a pet peeve of mine. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And we'll take this radiator. And now this, like you guys can see, hopefully, you know, there's like some holes on each corner of this. And how that's going to work is we're going to place the cooler on the CPU, and then we're going to put this guy right over top of it. Like that. So now, all we do from here is first off make sure this cable is out of the way. I'll explain what that little USB cable and stuff on there in a second. But simply just going to align that on top of the CPU. And now what we have are these little screws here. I'll go ahead and show it in this camera. Pretty small, but hopefully you can focus. And you simply just screw those down, make sure they're all snug and secure, and then that's your CPU cooler. Not all that hard to install. And this is definitely, you know, one of the more effective liquid cooling solutions on the market. The H80i is an awesome cooler. So for what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to, you know, these are thumb screws as well as their thread, you know, Phillips. But I'm just going to make sure they're snug right now, and I'll give them one last little tighten with the screwdriver once they're all in place and lined up and such. So we're almost done here. And now, while I'm doing this, chat room, what do you guys want to do next? Do you want to do like GPU? Do you want to throw in some sticks of RAM? Tell us, and be sure to let us know in the IRC chat. Take a quick swig of water. Helps already. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to get the screwdriver in there, give them one last tighten down, make sure everything's looking good. Yes, actually, we will be doing the OS install today. That's one thing that I tend not to do in my live hackintosh builds. I mean, like the first one or two that I did, I kind of showed it. You know, it wasn't like anything super crazy in depth. And today probably won't be either, but you know, I'll show UmiBeast and I'll show setting up OS 10, things like that. It's not going to be anything like ridiculously in depth or anything, but yeah, you guys will see a software install today. Alright, so CPU is in, and now branching off of this, is, you can actually see here, we have a little SATA connection. This, I believe, is how this is going to get powered. Actually, you know what? It might actually get powered from this guy. I think maybe what this is for. Actually, that's a good question. Maybe I should read the manual on that. I'm not sure if it gets power from both of these. And I know that the H80i, it has like a little USB interface to it, and that cable is actually right here. And this isn't anything that's going to benefit you with an OS 10, but there's actually software for Windows that lets you actually control the power that goes to this. And I think that's what that SATA cable is for that software, so that it can be manually controlled, because there's a SATA and there's also a 3-pin fan header. So I'm thinking that we're just going to be using a 3-pin fan header. But yeah, here's the cable. This goes into the actual cooler, and this plugs into a USB header on the motherboard. So pretty neat there. This also just looks like just a little fan controller. And yeah, it looks like that's, if you plug this also into the CPU brick, you plug this into the brick, and then these are two little 4-pin fan headers, which act as a little fan controller. So you can plug your case fans into this and have that software control not only your CPU cooling, but also your case cooling as well. So it's pretty neat. But one thing about this case, it has its own fan controller, so we can use that too. So tons of fan controlling options. Pretty sweet, actually. So I guess I'm not going to plug that in just yet. I'll save that for a little bit later. But I guess we'll go ahead and we'll mount this second fan here really quick. And
But
I
then
haven't been.
if you want to, a Jack the Mac 12 says let's do this process. Let's go with the RAM, then GPU.
RAM GPU, that's fine with
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
So now, where did I put the screws? Here they are. I was going to go ahead and install this fan really quick, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the RAM. All right, so this is pretty much the same thing, just in reverse, same as we did over here. And try to move this a little bit, get a better angle for you guys. We're just going to be taking this fan and securing it to this radiator. And as you can see, I mean, once you have two fans and this radiator, it takes a good amount of space. So, like I said earlier, be sure you check the clearance of your case, all your components. Make sure everything's going to fit, because this is not insignificant how much space this thing takes up. But because of it, you're going to get a great cooling result as well. So something to keep in mind. Dontae, how much RAM do you have in your Mac Mini? I'm curious.
I have 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance RAM that's running at 1600 megahertz, and I actually got it for a decent price. You know, you can easily spend about $150 for 16 gigs, and that's two 8 gig sticks since the Mac Mini only has two RAM slots. And I came in at around $110, so that worked out pretty well. And definitely, I don't know about you other users out there in the chat or anything like that, but if you've ever bought a Mac, usually they go a little low on the RAM. I mean, this thing shipped with 4 gigs of RAM, and that was two gig sticks at 1600 megahertz. I think that's an absolute joke, and that's just me. I mean, I like to have multiple windows open. I have two monitors and things like that, so I constantly have my messages, OS4 app, here, my mail, calendar, notes. I mean, there's so many different apps I use, the Adobe Suite, things like that. And, you know, definitely you can never have too much RAM. Our producer, Terrell, he has 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance RAM inside his Mac Pro. And, you know, honestly, without it, I mean, he couldn't do half the things that he's currently doing now. You know, RAM is a big deal, and you know, and who doesn't want to have more RAM? Who doesn't want to be able to quickly access your biggest applications, the things that are going to take longer to load and things like that? So, with having the 16 gigs of RAM and plus my solid state drive, it's a pretty good system. I like the Mac Mini. This is my first Mac Mini actually. Before then, I was using a 15-inch 2011 MacBook Pro with 16 gigs of RAM inside it, with a 240 gig solid state drive, and then a 640 and a data doubler. I took the with an OptiBay from OWC. You basically take out your optical drive and replace it with a hard drive caddy, where you can put either another SSD or another hard drive. Well, I opted to have another hard drive so I could have some more storage right there on hand, and you could do plenty of things with that. I mean, you could put a 1 terabyte hard drive in the data doubler slash OptiBay, whatever they're calling it now, and you know, you can partition it, put a boot camp deal on it to run Windows on it. I mean, you can literally almost have a desktop replacement, especially if you had like a 17-inch MacBook Pro that's pretty beefed up. I mean, that thing was a Core i7. I mean, it was not a slouch as a laptop anyway. It was very nice, and you know, I recently got rid of it to do the Mac Mini build, so it's good. I mean, everything I touch, I pretty much customize. So right now, it runs just fine. I mean, I swapped it's 0 RAM, and it's great because I'm using a lot of applications.
Yeah, I mean, my personal build has 12 gigs, and 3 years ago when I built that thing, that was out of this world. I mean, a lot has changed in 3 years. I mean, even when I'm just sitting here editing a video for my YouTube channel, that's only maybe 5 minutes long. Final Cut's using a lot of that. You know, I'm using like 5 gigs of RAM and I've only been editing for like maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. So the bigger the project gets, I mean, when it comes time to edit this particular video, that's like 1080p, like 2 hours long, you're using some RAM. And so you don't want to have less than, I would say, 8 gigs, even less than 16 when you're doing big editing projects like that. Otherwise, you'll start to see your performance decrease. So that's what's awesome about even this budget build here. Oh, not budget build, but I mean for the budget that this motherboard is in, like the price range, that's 32 gigs of RAM that you can have. And a couple years ago, that was just unheard of. So we've definitely made some pretty big advancements in computer memory. And speaking of computer memory, that's what we're going to be doing next. Up next, we have 16 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance. This is 1600 megahertz GDR3. So this is pretty standard RAM. A lot of people that I know in real life and online, they use this memory because it's very reliable. It cools very well, and it just looks awesome, honestly. And in a lot of gigabytes motherboards, it actually looks pretty good in any color you get it in. You make black, you make red, you make blue like this. So even that matters to some people. But so as far as installing this, what we're going to do is we're going to use the white DIMMs here. Now, in my particular experience, I've installed like in a 4 RAM configuration, like a 4 slot. If I'm using two DIMMs, I've installed in only white and I've installed in only blue. And what I've come to realize is that it'll boot either way. But to the OS, some things may not be reported correctly. Like for example, last time I used a very similar board to this, Z77 chipset board, and I used the blue slots, and it booted up, it worked just fine. But when I went into About This Mac, it reported as 0 megahertz. So little things like that shouldn't affect the performance, but it's more of a cosmetic thing. So they made this pretty dummy-proof nowadays that it'll boot either way. But in my personal experience, I find that you have to put them in the white DIMMs. And so don't do one of each, though. Don't do one white and one blue, because I don't think that'll boot. So make sure it's the same color, and it should at least boot either way. And so actually, I'll go ahead and I'll show this if you guys have never installed RAM before. There's a notch right here. It's actually off-centered. And the reason it's off-centered is to make sure you don't install it wrong. If you look at the slot, you might not be able to see this on your camera. I'll try to do my best to show this to you, but this radiator is kind of in the way. But there's actually an off-center notch on here, and so once you line that up, you can't install it wrong. So, make sure you just line it up, push down. You'll hear a satisfying click. You've installed a stick of RAM. We're going to do that twice. And like I said, a couple years ago, 8 gigs in my fingers like this was just unheard of.
Unheard of.
All right, and so there we go. So hope you guys can see it. There's like a nice little gap in there. I've installed them in the white slots, and so we've installed the RAM. So now as requested by you guys, and be sure to let me know what you guys want to install next in the chat, whether it's the power supply, which like I said, I tend to do last. We also have an optical drive down here. We have an SSD. We have a hard drive, and we have a Wi-Fi card as well. So what I'm going to do now is grab the GPU. Like I said in the beginning of this video, we are rocking an EVGA GeForce GTX 650 Ti Boost. Probably like the longest name in the history of names. But overall, an awesome card. Lots of CUDA cores, 768 to be exact. 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory. This is, the YouTube editor's awesome card. This is an awesome price range, awesome performance, and the card looks pretty sweet too. So you really can't go wrong with this card. It'll handle pretty much anything you throw at it with very respectable results. So I'm going to go ahead and crack open the box here. And I'm curious in the chat room to see the split of AMD versus NVIDIA users. And if you're watching the YouTube version, let us know in the comments whether you're using an AMD card or an NVIDIA card. Because it seems to me that a lot of people are tending to go with cards like this, cards that are in the 600 series on the NVIDIA side. So be sure to let us know what kind of card you're using. Dontae, if you were looking to build a hackintosh, based on, if you're not, I don't think that you edit tons of video or anything like that. So would you use applications like Premiere that take advantage of CUDA cores and get like an NVIDIA card, or would you rather go with like an AMD card?
Now, since at first the AMD cards I thought were better only because after everything was implemented with KEX updates and things like that companies like ATI that switched over and things like that, I always preferred the AMD cards. But NVIDIA has always had very good cards, and normally you can find some of those cards having higher specs, but of course when you have higher specs you have higher prices. AMD cards I've found in the past to have lower specs but will perform just as fine, and to do video editing and things like that, you're going to want the biggest card and the most performance out of it, you're going to look to have something kind of, maybe an overclocked version of a card or something like that that can help you out. But definitely, I would go with something with GDDR5. And honestly, if it nowadays, if it doesn't have at least a gig of RAM on the board, I won't touch it. And honestly, I think that's too low as far as using Final Cut and things like that. I know there's a card out right now that has four, or I'm sorry, maybe 3 gigs of RAM on it, and it's an absolute beast. And these cards are just getting bigger and bigger, and more and more performance are needed to be pushed out of these things. And the expandability, more people want more monitors and things to be expanded on. Some with mini display ports and or legit just display ports and things like that. I have a dual monitor setup. Terrell has a triple monitor setup and things like that. Now, those particular cards, of course, you can use your DVI and HDMI and things like that. But these card manufacturers are knowing that people are, doing more intensive things, at the same time and more multitasking. So, it depends on the type of user you are. But I would definitely go with the biggest card that my budget can afford. And that's definitely something you don't want to slouch on. Just like RAM, you want to get as much RAM as you possibly can. Even if your processor may not be the best processor, you could step down into a Core i5 and be just fine if you have compatible RAM, and video to take on that load for you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of gamers actually recommend a Core i5 over an i7 because, I mean, if you're playing a video game and you have a good dedicated GPU, the GPU is a lot more important than the CPU is. I mean, you could be playing a pretty decently spec'd game on, the max settings, and if you say you're on Windows and you Alt-Tab out and take a look at your performance, you're going to notice that that game was probably only using like half of your processor if you have like an i7. So a lot of gamers will actually recommend a Core i5 because that's, I mean, video games don't tend to use a lot of like cores and threads and stuff. They really want the GPU. They really want like what's going to render all those graphics out. It's not so much the CPU. And another point that even like our producer Terrell here that's doing all the shots here, he has, I believe, an AMD Radeon 7950 in his Mac Pro. That thing has 3 gigs of video memory on it. I don't know all the detailed specs of it, but he's running 3 27-inch cinema displays while he's doing all this camera switching and recording it and streaming it. So he's really taking advantage of that. So use that and take that into consideration when you buy your GPU. Are you just going to be playing games? If so, then get like an i5 with a pretty good GPU. Or if you're just going to be doing like content production, then you're going to want those extra cores in conjunction with a good GPU. So it really depends on the kind of user you are. Like this person here is going to be doing some video editing, so that's why he has an unlocked i7 plus a card that has 2 gigs of video memory. So he's not going to be seeing much performance degradation with his build. But so what we're going to do now is actually install this thing, this monster. I'm sort of going to angle this camera down. And you guys may or may not have seen it. I actually removed these 2 PCI gigs here. So here's this guy right here. And this is a dual width card. And you can kind of see like that. So we removed 2 of them, and now what we're going to simply do is push down. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shrink wrap off, and be sure you do that because as these components get more and more powerful, they put off more and more heat. And depending on your case and how cool this thing stays, if you leave this plastic wrap on, I mean, it's possible that it could kind of like fuse onto your card, and that's just not good. Then you start smelling some burnt plastic. So be sure you take this off. And I think there's a second piece here, which is weird. I thought it'd be all just one piece. Oh, and also try to, if you can, don't touch this, like the actual PCI connection with your fingers. Try to, not touch that as much as you can. So that piece of plastic has also come off. So now what we're going to do is simply align the GPU like so. And it's much like the RAM in that once it's lined up, all you simply got to do is push down and you'll hear a nice satisfying click. Done. And so now we're going to use those same screws that were holding those cages in place and just, secure them back in. It's really not rocket science. So definitely, don't be afraid if you've never built a computer before, because it's not as hard as some people may make it seem like it, or may make it out to be. Actually, what I'm going to do is put one of those screws down. Oh, this card, you'll kind of have to give it a push to the left here in order for this to line up. It's actually kind of weird. It really wants me to push it. And the board is it's installed right, all the screws are in. Quite the gap. But you know, definitely be careful when you do this. There you go. Yeah, that's easily the most I've ever had to push a GPU into its place. Chat turned off. Alright, so I'm just going to leave it at 1 right now, because I'm probably going to take it out after this video and run some cables. Some people might not know this. At like the bottom of every GPU, there's like a little square cutout where you can like route cables behind that if you need. I tend to do that with a lot of my builds, so I'm only going to put the one screw in for now, but you know, make sure you have both and put it in as you need. But Dontae, what do you think we should do next? We got a hard drive, a solid state drive, and a wireless card, also the power supply.
Let's go with the wireless card because, you know, I feel that once you put the wireless card in and then go with the SSD to install the OS, that, you know, everything will be, you know, right in sync. And I guess either way, you pretty much achieve the same goal. But, you know, I like to, in just my personal opinion, I like to have all my PCI expansion slots filled up first and then run all my cables. Now, I do have a question for you on the graphics card. Do you have a preference on where your 6-pin power adapter goes? I've seen different cars, they have them in different spots. Some have them in the back, and just my personal experience, when they're on the back of the car, depending on how big your case is and how much space you have, it's a lot harder to get power to them the back. And sometimes I have to run like an adapter or something to move the 6-pin, you know, out of, you know, that spot, you know, over to fit my needs a little bit better. But what are your preferences on that, on the placement?
You know, my preference would be something that hasn't been done yet. And actually, it's kind of hard to say because every board is like a different width. But like even on this board here, it'd be cool that, you know, you guys can't really see it. But yeah, Dontae, I know what you're saying. Like, for example, on this card, it's right up here. You know, on some cards, they have it like on this edge, like right over here. I would like, and I actually haven't seen a card yet that has done this, but it's on this side, but like all the way down here at the bottom. Because every single GPU I've ever installed, you know, if like from this, if say for example you have a case that has a clear side panel on it, every card I've ever installed, you can see the power cable that connects into that GPU. And I wish that wasn't the case. You know, I wish they could move that into some space, maybe like I said, way back down, like under here somewhere. Like not necessarily under the card, but as far down on this surface as possible, so that you really have to look to see it. That would be my dream. But I guess, yes, we're just going to go ahead and proceed with the Wi-Fi card. And now something interesting here that you guys might not realize right off the bat is that this card right here, this is a PCI 1X slot. And we actually have a PCI 1X slot, but you can see it's basically touching this card. And so if I were to install it, there would be room, but there's very little clearance. So what we can do is this PCI 1X card, you can actually throw these in a standard PCI Express slot. It will still fit, even though it doesn't take up that full lane. And it will function just the same. And I'd rather do that because it's going to give us some more room to spread that heat out. You know, rather than having the card literally be right here and very close to that card, we can back it off to about here and give that GPU and even the wireless card a little bit more room to breathe. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you're installing more than one PCI device. Keep that in mind. So we're going to take off the accompanying, I guess you could say, PCI gate. And now, all right, watch how simple. Watch how simple. Now you see it. Now you go. That easy. You just slide it right in the slot. Once again, that's right in that blue PCI Express slot. Will work just fine. There's no compatibility with problems with that or anything. It'll work just fine. Put that screw back in. Wi-Fi card is now installed. Now with the TP-Link TL WDN4800, we have these 3 little antennas that go on the back of the card. I'm not too worried about that right now because it's literally just like you screw them in, not a big deal. I can always do that later. So now that the Wi-Fi card is installed, would you like to move to Dontae, the solid-state drive, hard drive, or an optical drive?
Let's go optical.
Optical?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so now what I'm actually going to have to do, and I'm going to try to show this to you guys at the best of my ability. And it's going to be really hard to get like a really nice angle, but I think I'm probably just going to show the main camera this. But you can see the two optical drive bays. And how we're going to do this is actually pretty easy. So there's like a little lever here that you can probably kind of see on the YouTube version of it. So I apologize for the live viewers. I know it's not the best camera in the world, but it comes off that easy. And so now what we're going to do with the actual drive, this isn't necessarily a fully toolless kit. There's actually a screw that we need to put in here that'll hold it. Some cases will actually have that all built in, and once you slide it in, it has a locking mechanism, and that's it's really easy. This case unfortunately does not have that. So once we slide this optical drive in, we actually need to have some screws in here to secure it in place. Try to line this up just right. There we go. And just like that, you've installed an optical drive. And now there's little holes on the side here that I guess we can try to show you guys, although they are very small. I'll try to move some of these screws and such out of the way here. Like a table full of packages and wires and such. But it's going to be close if you guys can actually see them or not. But they're located right over here. And I know there's absolutely no chance in the world that live viewers are going to be able to see it. But on the YouTube version, maybe. There's like these little cutouts here. And right now, it's actually lined up. And so then what we can do is we can take some of these screws. And we'll see if these ones line up, if these ones are the right size. Yeah, these ones look a little big. Now, Terrell, Dontae rather, do you use optical media on a daily basis at all?
Not at all. Optical media to me personally is almost obsolete. A good example is here's the Parallels Desktop 8 for Mac that I have. This is the latest app that I bought, and the CD is still inside of it. In the case, it's never been ran because I do everything digitally. I'll download the DMG file and go from there. And also, I don't know if people know this, but the 2012 Mac Mini doesn't even have an optical drive built into it. So it's a little slimmer, things like that. And you'll start to see that over time where, you'll start seeing less and less optical drives, with things such as the MacBook Air, Ultrabooks, things like that. A lot more netbooks are being pushed out and a lot more famous and things like that. And also with the Mac Pro, it's also, doesn't have an optical drive. So the new Mac Pro, rather. And, you'll start seeing this, I think, kind of slowly fade away. But then also there's options still, just in case people still need them. I mean, you can buy super drives and external optical drives and things like that. My last particular build, Hackintosh didn't have an optical drive. And, by the time I finally put one in it, it was pretty much when I was getting rid of it. So, and it was just because that particular customer wanted to have an optical drive in it. And, but to me, optical media is just almost on its way out. I do everything digitally. I have tons and tons of, flash drives. I keep flash drives everywhere. And, I like to move my files and data on it because it's a lot faster than optical drives. You don't have to worry about burning or any sort of burning formats and things like that. And also in my car and my BMW that I drive, I have a media head unit, which doesn't even have an optical drive in it to play CDs. I play everything usually by Bluetooth, by flash drive, iPod, things like that. I still have a lot of media sources because it comes with 2 USB ports. And that's just me. But personally, a lot of people, they like to run CDs, they like to maybe rip DVDs and turn them into digital files and things like that. So you definitely need that for that particular purpose. So.
Yeah,
But I honestly just don't see the point. That's just me.
I really honestly cannot remember the last time I used my optical drive. I mean, I have one, but I never use it. I mean, any software I install, I've created a disk image that I could just double click in OS 10 and it installs. And even CDs, I never use anymore. In my car, I just recently put a CD deck in there, and I've just been using my iPhone that has a little USB connection on it. So I agree with you there. I mean, I never use my optical drive, and there's plenty of times where like I'm trying to spec out a build on Newegg, and I just forget all about the optical drive. I mean, it doesn't even cross my mind anymore to even include it. And I have a little budget computer that's actually below this table, helping us with the stream here, and that doesn't have an optical drive, and it's just running Windows 7, just a little budget build, and I'm not missing an optical drive. I mean, I don't have one, and I'm not missing it. So I'm sure
I'm with you.
All right, so hopefully you guys can see this in the live feed, but we have our optical drive installed. And so now what I think we're just going to jump into is the solid state drive. And I think for the purpose of this video, just for the purpose of routing cables and stuff, I'm probably only gonna do the solid state drive in this video. But the hard drive will be obviously very similar to this. You just simply plug it in and route the SATA cable, screw it in the drive, or in the little mount here, and you're good to go. Nothing crazy. But so here's the SSD that we chose for this build. We actually got an awesome deal on this on Amazon. This is a SanDisk 240 gigabyte solid state drive, which personally I wish I had myself. I have an Intel, I think it's Maple Crest, 120 gigabyte solid state drive, and I still have maybe like 30 gigs free on it, but I'm always trying to install new applications, and I'm downloading stuff. And so I really would like to make the jump to a 240, and the prices are coming down now to the point that you really could get away with 240 gigs, and your wallet wouldn't be that as empty as you would think it would be. So I mean, they're definitely coming down, which is awesome to hear. And so let's see, did we get any screws with this solid state drive? I don't think we did, and if we didn't, it's not a big deal, because we have plenty of other ones here that we could use. And so I think we're just going to go with that rather than to keep on searching. But in case you guys have never installed an SSD to one of these kind of trays before, some are toolless, some aren't. This is a case that it's not toolless. Now, at the bottom of every solid state drive, we have these little holes. There's 4, 1, 2, and then 3, 4 at the bottom. And so you simply line it up with the corresponding holes on the little drive bay, right around there. And then, you simply screw in. Really nothing crazy here, guys. Now, Dontae, I missed it earlier. What's the capacity of the SSD you have in your Mac Mini?
Mine's a 120 gigabyte solid state drive made by OCZ. It's an OCZ Agility 3. I've owned probably 5 or 6 of those, just that particular drive, and they're nice. I haven't had one crap out on me yet. My last one, this particular one, came from Newegg. It was DOA, but that was before I touched it. But other than that, I mean, they were really nice about it. They sent me another one right out. Never had a problem with it. Boots up super fast. Move files just really fast, and then the read-write speeds are good on it too. A lot of people, I don't know why, but they're in love with the Samsungs, and the Samsungs have slower read-write speeds than most of the OCZs and different drives that are out there, and some of the best speeds that I've seen have been through Intel's solid-state drives, but you're definitely going to pay for your speed too. But I think OCZ is a good company to go with as far as solid-state drives. I haven't ran like a SanDisk or anything like that, but as far as performance and as far as the life of them, at least as far as my personal experience, I haven't heard of any of them going down. I had an OCZ Agility 4 240 gig solid state drive in my 2011 MacBook Pro, and I never had a problem with it. And I like them. I mean, right now they're getting a little harder to find, and I think because the demand for larger drives are going up. So you're going to start seeing the prices, like you said, of your 240s and even your 480s going down a lot. So definitely going to be upgrading here.
I have the same drive in my budget build that you have, the OCZ Agility 3, except mine's only a 60 gig, and I got mine like 2 years ago. It's an older drive, and overall it's been great. But that drive is the reason that I don't have a live Mufasa build, that dual Xeon hackintosh build on YouTube, because it had a phase where it kind of went into a coma, that I call it. I one day just tried to boot into it, nothing came up. I tried to boot into my Chimera drive and format it. It wouldn't let me format it. It wouldn't let me partition it. It wouldn't let me boot from it or anything. That was in my main machine here, but I also tried it in a different machine, and the same thing happened. And so I was getting ready to, it was way out of warranty by that time, so I couldn't return it or anything. And about 2 weeks later, it started working again. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try this one last time before I shell out money on another SSD. I throw it in there, it partitions and erases just fine. And so then I was able to, but I lost the stuff that was on it. And so it's weird. I mean, it's right now that's what the SSD is, what's powering this camera here. I mean, it's fine. It's working fine now, but it had like a little coma, and it cost me, an awesome YouTube video. So overall, it was a good build. Things happen.
Right, right. And then also with, with flash-based storage, I mean, it's still relatively new, and, there's going to be some hiccups. You got to realize, these parts are massively produced. So you can have 1,000 of the same exact solid state drive, and 998 of them will work perfectly fine, but those other two are going to crap out on you. And some of them, it's just performance-wise, you got to realize these things are man-made and just machined by different parts and manufacturers. So, of course, there's going to be some sort of level of error. But, to me, the speed is just unbelievable as far as these things. But the problem is to replace a smaller drive, like you said, like a 60 gig or something, can get kind of expensive if you're going through, cheaper solid-state drives or something. So it's definitely something you need to think about before buying an SSD. I recommend it for everyone, though, honestly. I think moving parts is dated. I mean, when I put a solid-state drive in my 2011 15-inch MacBook Pro, I noticed right off the bat a better performance in battery because of it not having to use more power to power the spinning disks. Now, I noticed a little bit of a drop when I put my Optibay in there and put my 640 gig hard drive for storage, because now it's powering an SSD and a hard drive with moving parts. But if I had put two solid state drives in there, I mean, that thing would have been just perfect. And I noticed, and I know it's a little different with having a desktop because you're always wired in to your outlet, but definitely for a laptop like a MacBook or MacBook Pro 13, 15, 17-inch, things like that, I recommend it just for the speed, the boost, as far as file transfers, read-write speeds, and things like that, and giving yourself more time off of the AC charger. I think is great, and we're definitely going to see these things get faster. These things aren't going away; they're just going to get better. I mean, like you said, with the PCI versions of these solid-state drives that reach unbelievable speeds, and they're just going to get more and more. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know if anybody on the chat may think that, maybe Apple will come out with like the 2013 Mac Mini will have, some sort of PCI storage, kind of like the Mac Pro does. And, you never know, but everything is going towards it. You can see like the Retina displays and things like that, the MacBook Airs, things like that. Everything is solid state drive. Everything is solid state drive. And, with the way that Apple manufactures their parts and everything is already soldered into the logic board as far as a RAM too, I think it just helps with the speed without having to exactly plug anything into it, like say USB wise or, any other way, and you get direct connect, and your power and your speed will be just great from there because it's a direct connect right into your logic board.
Yeah, like you said, the PCI-based SSDs they're kind of becoming more popular now, and they're definitely a lot faster. And the reason they're a lot faster is because, the speed of SATA 3. SATA 3 maxes out at, I believe, 600 megabytes per second.
Right.
And so, I mean, PCI is faster than that, but I wonder maybe if, in a year or two, maybe we'll see like SATA 4, which just beats PCIe. So like you said, I mean, these things aren't going away. They're just going to get faster and more capacity.
Right, and I could definitely see that because with this 2012 Mac Mini, this is the first, no, I'm sorry, I'm the second computer that I've had that has USB 3.0 support, and my last Hackintosh build had USB 3.0 support on it, but I couldn't get it to work. But when I switched over to my boot camp with Windows, I could see the difference in data transfer speed between like a USB flash drive that was USB 3.0 to a USB 3.0 external hard drive, and the transfer speed was ridiculous. I remember when I finally bought this Mac Mini and did my boot off a flash drive that was USB 3.0. I installed the OS so fast that it didn't make any sense, and I was surprised because of that. So there's always going to be upgrades. You know, we're going to be seeing, you know, USB 4.0, and then, you know, like you said, SATA 4, things like that. So, you know, it's only getting better. You know, people, you know, these manufacturers, they're always working on these things, and never know. There might be a complete different form factor where USB goes away. I mean, I remember me and Terrell were having a conversation about a week or so ago, and we were thinking that, you know, what if the USB line pretty much becomes outdated and obsolete, and everything becomes Thunderbolt, because Thunderbolt can do so many different things on that port. And I mean, I could definitely see that, especially with data speeds and things getting as fast as they're getting. I could definitely see a computer or a Mac Mini or an iMac or something with nothing but Thunderbolt ports on the back of it, especially because I read an article about Intel having a 12 gigabyte Thunderbolt flash drive, and it's really nice. I'm not sure if it's available to the market yet or anything like that, but I have heard speculations about it.
Yeah, it would be nice to have a flash drive in your pocket that can go, you know, 20 gigabytes per second. It would be nice. I mean, that gets to the point where you could like carry an operating system with you and boot off it and run it via Thunderbolt and not experience any slowdowns. Would be nice. But yeah, tell us what you think in the comments below. I mean, do you think we'll see SATA 4 pretty soon, or PCI 4? What kind of speeds do you think we'll get? Sure, let us know down there in the comments. And also, which do you prefer? Do you prefer to have a PCI solution, or do you prefer to run these wires? Whatever it is, let us know in the comments. But what we're going to do now is we're going to actually just plug in the solid-state drive via the SATA. We'll do the power in just a second here. But I'm going to try to zoom in on the YouTube version as far as I can go. But there's the SSD right here. And so what's nice is that if you can, look for cables that are like this, how it's like 90 degrees. Those are awesome because, you know, if it's sticking out like this, then you have to bend it. That just puts wear on the cable. So 90-degree ones are definitely awesome for optical drives or, you know, storage options like this. But so what we're going to do is simply plug that in there. And I'm not going to go crazy with cable management right now because, you know, there's obviously going to be a lot more work I do with this machine before I actually, you know, ship it out and have a completed build here. But I'm just simply going to run it through one of those little wire grommets. I ran it right through around here. And now if we can switch to this camera, if we haven't already, here's that cable. And this you're really not going to be able to see all that well, at least I don't believe so, because the GPU is blocking them. But there's SATA ports right here that this guy plugs into. And so then from there, all you do, and make sure that if it's a SATA drive, most gigabyte motherboards, the way that it works, SATA 3 is white, and that's what you're going to want to take advantage of the speeds of this SSD. SATA 2 is not as fast as SATA 3, and even some of these newer solid-state drives actually exceed the SATA 3 limit. I mean, they're getting to be that fast now. So make sure you plug this in SATA 3 if you want to get, you know, the most out of it. And even with that, there's even different SATA 3 controllers that are faster than others. Like the dedicated Intel one is better than, say, a Marvell controller. The Marvell controller is a lot slower, even though it's the same SATA 3 bus. So there's definitely some research you have to do when you're building or when you're looking to build a computer. If you want the latest and greatest, the fastest, be sure it's SATA 3 on a good controller. But with that said, the SSD is now plugged in, and aside from power, we're pretty much ready to boot from it, or at least, you know, install an OS to it. And we're down to the last part here, and that's going to be the power. As you guys heard earlier, I like to save the power supply for last. I think it just reduces the amount of clutter. And for this particular build, I think we're going to need about 4 cables. We're going to need the main 24-pin ATX. We're going to need the dual 4-pin for the CPU. We're going to need a 6-pin for the GPU. And then we're also going to need a SATA power cable for our SSD. So something to keep in mind. Make sure your power supply has all those necessary connections on it. And what's cool is that actually I think I put it down here. Even if you have like an older power supply that the wattage is capable, but you don't have those connections, what's included with the card is a dual Molex to a 6-pin. So, you know, that's pretty cool that the card just comes with that. Most of you guys out there probably don't need that, But it is nice if you have a power supply, maybe it's like 450 watts, that is capable of running this card, but just don't have the necessary connections. That can really save you. So what we're going to do here is just take this out of the bubble wrap that I know you all really want to pop right now. Hulk. Alright, so now we're just going to set this over here for a second. And in case you guys missed it at the beginning of the video, or you just weren't paying attention, or whatever have you, I'll just go ahead and show the box to the YouTube guys real quick here. This is a Silverstone power supply. I've heard nothing but good things about Silverstone, but this is actually my first one I've ever had in a build. It's a 500 watt. It's going to be just about right for this build, maybe 50 to 100 watt difference of computer's idle or something like that. There will still be a little room for expansion, but not overly, not a ton of room for. If you want like another GPU, you're probably going to have to go out and buy another CPU or another power supply. So keep that in mind. But what we're going to do here, and as I pointed out earlier, this case is a bottom mounting for the power supply. So we're going to throw this in the bottom. But what we're going to do first is unleash the spaghetti. And we're going to take this out. And we're going to take all those 4 cables we need. We have our 20 plus 4 for our main ATX power. We have our, we have our 4-pin here, our dual 4-pin like that. So we're going to try to, once again, unleash the spaghetti. I say that because it looks like spaghetti. And we have our 6-pin PCI for our GPU. And then we also we have Molex on here, which we shouldn't need, but we might if there's something up on here on this front I/O that needs it. So we might need that, but I don't think we will. It could be wrong though. And also our SATA for our solid drive. So once again, this isn't the best power supply on the market in terms of its price and actual options. So we're going to need pretty much all these cables in this build. So a lot of power supplies that you maybe spend $100 or even like $120 on, they're going to have a lot more connection options. But if you don't need them, why have them? So when you're choosing a power supply, pick what's right for your system. Really look at what you need, the components you have, what they need, and don't go overkill. I mean, in some of my builds, I actually do go overkill on purpose. It's because a lot of people want to keep that computer for a very long time, and if you want to keep your computer modern for a long time, you're going to need to upgrade it. And so later, like components that come out a year from now are probably going to require, at some level, more power than the ones on the market do now. So it's good that if you go to upgrade that you don't have to shell out money for a new power supply as well. So something to keep in mind, look at how much you're going to upgrade and go with the appropriate wattage. And actually, there's actually a utility, I think that Newegg has. It's like a little power supply wattage calculator. You can actually put in like the specs that you have and they'll give you an estimate of how much wattage it is and what you should buy. So just go ahead and Google that. I'm sure it's really easy to find. But so for a power supply, you have these little cables here. Actually, I'm going to try to move this camera here so we can see what's going on with the power supply. So bear with me for 1 second. Hopefully you guys can see that at least well enough. So right there, it looks like all those 4 little holes, it looks like they're all in line. And so you simply just screw them in. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty straightforward.
Now, I have a question for you, Bob. Do you prefer a modular power supply or non-modular? And guys in the chat, if you guys want to type, which one, you guys prefer, of course, a modular, you're able to take off certain, Molex connections and different SATA cables and things like that. You can just take them off if you're not going to use them. Just give me, some sort of opinion on what you have and why would you like to have that particular version of power supply?
Well, in short, sir, modular power supplies are freaking awesome, but they're for people that don't like spaghetti. I mean, they're for, you guys saw that on this power supply, we couldn't really take any of it off. Say, for example, you have a computer that requires a decent amount of different connections. but not all of them that come with the power supply. On a modular power supply, like you said, you can remove those ones. Say, for example, there's some Molex on there, and none of your parts use Molex. You can take that cable off. And so that's less wires cluttering up your system. Now, it kind of depends on how OCD you are about how clean the inside of your case is. You know, if you have a case that has awesome cable management and you really want to take advantage of that, it's better if you don't have like many cables that you have to manage. If you can just take all those off and not worry about it, have a nice clean look without having to do much work. So, I mean, it's better, and what's cool that is like when you buy a modular power supply, they still give you every single connection that you could have in there. And so say, for example, you go out in a month, you buy a new part that needs that, you can simply plug it back in and be on your way. So modular power supplies, while a little more expensive than a regular power supply, and that's what's going to turn some people away, is the price. If you're a person that likes to have a nice, clean computer, then it's definitely a worthwhile investment because it will keep the inside of your case looking really nice and clean, especially if, like me, you have a see-through side panel on your machine. And I mean, they're typically not too much more expensive, but enough of a difference that some people would say, yeah, you know what, I'll live with a few more wires. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to run, and of course, I'm not going to have like, you know, the best cable management in mind right now. And like I said, that's the same reason that I'm not worrying about the solid state drive very much. I'm going to redo pretty much everything about this computer in terms of its cable management at a later time. But I just want to get the thing booting so we can go ahead and install some OS 10 on it. So right now, like I said, I'm not going to be routing these behind the board and everything. I'm simply just going to have them plugged in and booted. And so to do that, actually I think I need to raise this camera up a little more, just so you can see all the different connectors and all that fun stuff. Yeah, even this, there's a 24-pin ATX that's right here that I really don't think you guys can see all that well. But trust me, it's there. I'm not lying to you guys. And basically all we're going to do with that is take this 20 plus 4-pin ATX connector. And I say 20 plus 4 because some motherboards only have 20. But if you have a 24-pin, then you just add on the extra 4 and you're good to go. So we're just going to take that and we're going to plug it right in just like you would think that you would. It's really nothing crazy here, guys. And so just like that, you push it straight down and it's installed. Nothing crazy, rocket science out of this world here. And now we're going to do the same thing with the 4-pin. Now, something to keep in mind, and Dontae mentioned this earlier, is this big radiator. Make sure that it's going to fit. I do have a ton of clearance, but these connectors are like right here, directly underneath. So I'm going to have to kind of fight with this here in order to plug those in, because it's just like this, and now you have to plug them in straight down like this, and of course that's there. So it's going to take some effort, and I think because of that, for now, I'm just going to go with the 1. And that's another thing too. If you're not going to be overclocking a processor at all, you can probably get away with just having one of these plugged in. You don't need to have both. But if you have both, I don't know why you would do that. It's just something fun to note that you don't have to use both. But if you plan on overclocking, then it's obviously a good idea because more frequency on your processor equals more voltage, which requires more power. So yeah, this is definitely going to be kind of a pain to route. As Borat would say, great success. We are in. Right, that is in. Now this is the Molex. And you can't really see it because, once again, this GPU is in the way here. There is a Molex connector on here. And I believe that's like the power for all the stuff on the front I/O. Mainly being the fan controller. Like I said earlier, there's a built-in fan controller on here that'll increase and decrease the voltage to the fan as you need it. So say, for example, you're editing in Final Cut or Premiere, and you go to export where you're using a lot more CPU, you can crank your fans up and really cool more efficiently. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in just because. And it's just one simple connection, nothing insane there. Alright, we're good there. Alright, now this is the 6-pin right here for the GPU. So there's that, and that simply plugs into the GPU. Once again, rocket science, insane. And so now what we're going to do is tip up this case, and I'm going to try to show this to the YouTube version up here. Once again, I apologize to the live viewers for not being able to be zoomed in, but that's something that hopefully we can work on in a future video, a future computer build. And so here's our SATA connection. And we're going to plug that right next to, actually it goes like this. Okay, right now, power supply manufacturers, why do you do this? The cable obviously wants to go like this, right? But it's set so that it has to be like this. Why do you do this? I mean, Corsair, Silverstone, Thermaltake, any other manufacturers, they do the same thing. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? Okay, but that one's now in. Really not a big deal, but it just makes for better cable management. Makes your life a little bit easier if they would all flow the way you want them to. You guys that have built a computer, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And so now what we have to do here, this is probably one of the most tedious parts, and it's easy. The wires are just really small. And that's just going to be your front I/O. That's going to be your USB ports. That's going to be your power switch, your power LED, little things like that. In order to do this, I actually might break out my iPhone, because I know it's kind of dark inside this case. And try to get you guys as close as I can. Might actually have to go. You can see it? Alright, that's cool. Now hopefully I can get you guys to see what I want you to see here. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of far away. I can't get you guys in exactly as close as I would like it. But we do what we can here at RocheTechnology. Alright, so what we're going to be looking at here, and once again, mind the spaghetti, is this guy right here. I know you guys can't see it very well, and I do apologize for that. But that's where these little switches are going to go here. Hopefully you guys can read these. May or may not be able to. This is the reset switch. Here's your power LED positive and your power LED minus or negative. And also here we have the actual powered switch. This is what makes it possible that when you click the button, the machine turns on. And it's really hard to see it, but on this little guy right down here, sorry, my hands are right down here, there's a little guide underneath that tells you exactly where everything needs to go. And so what we're going to do first is the power switch, and I think that's all we're going to do just for the purpose of the stream. Once again, the others aren't really essentials, and even this isn't essentials. Pro tip, fun fact, if you just get something metal and you touch both the positive and the negative pins together, it completes the circuit, turns your machine on, in case you didn't know that. It's a little fail-safe for if you don't have a front switch, you're just dealing with, like a test bench or something. If you need to turn the machine on, touch those pins with something metal and you'll be good to go. But so what we're going to do is connect the power switch, and it's very much just like any other connection we've done here today, in that you just line it up and you push directly straight down on it. And that's pretty much all there is to it. And so now here we have these other connections, like for example this guy here. This is a USB 3.0 header. And let's see here. The USB 3.0 header on this board is way up here. So I'm going to try to, once again, can't see it at all because this GPU is blocking it, but trust me, it's there. But you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it right now because you won't be needing it. But plug that in, you're good. Now here is what looks to be the HD audio. Now that's going to be interesting for this build because I might have to undo their pre-routed wiring because this cable won't reach because the audio is like way over here behind this power supply. So, and as you can see, the cable is only this long and it has to reach all the way over here. So I'm going to have to come over here and unroute their cable and find a better way to route it over there. So joys of custom building a PC, awesome stuff. So I'm just going to leave that as it is, and we'll still have audio. That's just the audio for your microphone and your headphone, like the inputs and outputs on the front panel of your computer. And so now, the last connection we're going to be doing here is the USB, and those are typically on the bottom of every motherboard that you come across. It's kind of hard to show you guys this. There's two little USB headers you may or may not be able to see right down here. This right here is a USB header. And just like before, you just find it, and you push down directly on it. Actually, and I'm going to go ahead and show you this guy too. I really hope you can see this. If not, then I apologize. But if you look directly at a USB header, you'll notice that there's one that is not a hole. I mean, nothing actually goes in there. It's covered. So if you try to plug this in the wrong way, it's not going to go in. So if you find yourself trying to install this and it's just not going in, turn it the other way. Don't go and break a pin. So yeah, see, I actually installed it upside down, which is why it wasn't going in. So turn it, and now it should go in just fine. The magic of physics, let me tell you what. And just like that, we should have a booting computer. So what do you guys say we try to move around the setup a little bit, and we'll try to install OS 10. So yeah, let's go ahead and do this. All right, so here we are at the machine. We have the monitor all set up, and probably like the most important thing we're going to be doing right now relies on this guy. This is a UniBeast flash drive. This is not a special flash drive. This is just an 8 gig flash drive. And I actually have a whole tutorial on how to create this, what it is, everything like that on my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type CPU Kid UniBeast, and I'm sure you'll find it. Pretty self-explanatory guide. And so right now, this is the machine that I'm using to watch everything. But I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to HDMI. And our computer should be good to boot now. I'm going to go ahead and turn the power supply on. And it powered on. Obviously, the light didn't come on because I didn't wire the power light. But the fans inside are all spinning and stuff. And so we should have video in a second here. All right, so here we are with the machine powering on. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete, and that's going to get us into our BIOS settings. Now from here, what we have to do, I'm going to come down here, and you can use this pretty slick interface if you want, but I always arrow down here and go to the advanced, and that puts me in more familiar territory. What we're going to have to do is go ahead and configure a few things. So I'm going to go over here and navigate to peripherals. As you can see right here, our SATA mode selection is set to IDE. If that's the case on your particular board, it has to be set to AHCI. Otherwise, it's not going to see your drive when you go to actually install OS 10. And depending on your motherboard, you could have different options down here that are also set for IDE. If any of those exist, in this case they don't, then be sure to turn them all to AHCI. In terms of power management, some people have had great success, and some people just haven't been able to get theirs working. All these different settings here, you can more than likely leave them as they are by default. Then when you want to mess with this stuff is if you're having problems. So if you're not having any problems, as my dad has always taught me, don't fix what isn't broken, leave it all alone. Now, in terms of anything else over here, most RAM that comes at 1600 megahertz probably is only running at 1333. And so a way to check that is to go to the advanced memory settings. And yes, as you can see right here, it's set to a multiplier of 13.33, yielding us our 1333. So we can actually hit enter here, or actually on this BIOS, I think we just start typing 16. And now, just like that, we will overclock our memory to 1600 megahertz. So little things like that you may want to keep in mind. But with that said, now we can save and exit. And now what we're going to do is, if you're running a gigabyte board, which you probably are, most people do, you're going to want to hit the F12 key when you get to that screen. And that's going to allow us to get into our BIOS, or not BIOS. We can actually this is our boot selection screen. And we can choose to boot into a flash drive, which we're going to do here, or we can boot into another hard drive, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to boot from the Kingston Data Traveler, which is our UniBeast drive. And this right here is the magic. This right here is what lets us boot into OS 10, this bootloader here, which is also compatible with Windows, so you can also boot Windows right side by side. And for this particular build, theoretically right now, I can just hit enter, and it's going to boot up just like a real Mac. Now, depending on your hardware, you might have to enter what we call kernel flags. And probably the most straightforward kernel flag is -V. This isn't really going to affect the way your system boots, but this is a real-time feedback, or a verbose boot, that lets you see what the computer is doing behind that majestic Apple logo. But now, say for example you're running an older card, like personally, I have an AMD Radeon HD 6850. Now that card, you have to go and actually make the graphics enabler function of the bootloader set to no. And for that, you'd actually literally type out here, graphics enabler equals no. So there's different flags like that you really have to research if you want to do, be in the hackintosh world. You have to know your hardware, and you have to know what you have to do to get OS 10 to work with it just fine. But like I said, for this build, we're not going to have to enter anything. So I'm just going to hit enter, and we should see that majestic Apple logo. And then before you know it, we're going to be into the actual OS 10 installer. All right, so here we are at the Mac OS 10 installer, and just go ahead and click continue. Now you're going to continue again. You're going to agree to all Apple's awesome terms, even though we're technically breaking them. And right now, this is you're at a point now where you're going to be like, all right, listen, I know I have my hard drive plugged in. Why isn't it showing up here? And the reason is because your hard drive doesn't have any partitions on it. At this point, it's a brand new hard drive that has not been formatted at all yet, so it cannot hold an OS. So that's what gets a lot of people to check their connections, and it'll drive them nuts. So what we have to do is come up here, come to disk utility, and now over here on the left, we see we have a 240 gig SSD or whatever hard drive or solid state drive you have. We're going to click that partition tab. For our purposes here, we're just going to do one partition, and I'm just going to call it Macintosh SSD. You want to click Options. Make sure it's GUID. MBR is typically for Windows and things like that. And I'm going to give it the full allocation of that 240 gigs. The whole drive will be for OS X. We're going to hit Apply. Partition. Won't take very long. Already done. We're going to close out of disk utility. Now we're going to just install to the drive. And depending on, if you're installing to a hard drive versus a solid state drive, or the speed even of that SATA bus, this on an SSD typically takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Hard drives could take anywhere from maybe 10 to 20. So however long it takes, I'll be back as soon as mine's done. But as you can see here, the install has now succeeded, and we're going to reboot. Now, whenever you go to reboot, what you're going to have to do is once again boot from the flash drive, because at the moment there is no bootloader installed on the SSD. Therefore, you're not going to be able to boot into it. So now what we're going to do is, from this list here, we're going to select the SanDisk, which is our drive that we just installed to. I'm sorry, it went to this screen because it saw that there wasn't a bootloader on the SanDisk. It went to our flash drive. That's what I meant to say. You have to boot from your flash drive. And this time, when you go to Chimera, instead of just having UniBeast, you're going to have Macintosh SSD as well. So we just arrow over. And once again, just like the installer, we should not need any kernel flags. On this system, it's so compatible that it should just boot right up. So drum roll, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all those awesome, funny expressions. And then once we get past this screen, we should be greeted with, welcome, set up this computer. And just like that, we do have our welcome screen. So obviously, United States, RocheTechnology. I'm just going to type my password in here. And once again, further demonstrating that the Wi-Fi works right out of the box. That TP-Link TLWDN 4800 Wi-Fi card works right out of the box. We're going to enable our location services. Why not? At this point, I'm not going to sign in because it's not my computer. So we're just going to skip this. And actually, you know what? It doesn't even matter. I'm just going to put in my name, and I'll just do a clean install later on. Very extremely secure. Yeah, I could also do that. Just delete my account, create a new one. That Good Man is a gangster, though. We're going to leave him. Alright, we're going to set our time zone automatically, although that's where this computer will be going, to the east, the East Coast, or sorry, West Coast, if I get my directions right. We're going to skip any kind of registration, and we're going to start using our quote-unquote Mac. And so now here we are at the desktop. We're going to come up to the Apple logo, and I'm really honestly not sure how well you guys are going to be able to see this, but we are running 10.8.4, which is the latest and greatest version of Mac OS X. We have our 3.5 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i7. We have our 16 gigabytes of 1600 megahertz RAM. Once again, that was 1333. I changed that in the BIOS. And we can go to more information. We can get our display information. We can go to storage and see our SSD here. And so let's see, our 240 gig SSD now has 224 gigs left. So what is that? 16 gigs or so, and I'm going to go ahead and, where is Zoom? Is that in accessibility? Yeah, Zoom, use control, so yeah. So here we go. Now you guys should be able to see this a bit better. All right, so now here's that 3.5 gigahertz Intel Core i7, 16 gigs of 1600 DDR3. Our GPU is even recognized as the boost, so GPU is perfectly recognized. Storage, our memory DIMMs says 8. So I mean, this looks like a real Mac right now. I mean, this is pretty awesome. We're in pretty good hands right now. And right now, I guess what we'll do is, because I know you guys want to see it, we're going to go and download Geekbench. Now keep in mind, this is just going to be a 32-bit test. I really don't feel like hunting down my serial key or anything like that. So we're just going to do a 32-bit benchmark, but it should still give you guys a pretty good idea of what the system's capable of. And also I'm going to go to security and privacy and put in our password here. And we're going to allow apps for anywhere, because also what we have to do is go to TonyMac. Actually, you know what? I may or may not. Yeah, never mind. I thought I might have used multi-beast on this drive already, but I don't. TonyMac36.com. And then we're going to download multi-beast. And oh yeah, I forgot to plug the antenna in on my Wi-Fi card, so I'm probably not getting my full speed. But it's still working, surprisingly, so that's good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and run Geekbench. Something to keep in mind that Safari is running, so that might... actually, I think our download just finished, so let me see if I can close it. Yep. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and close it then. And so now we're going to go out and see what Geekbench can do. And keep in mind, this is at fully, stock speeds on a 32-bit test. So I would estimate maybe like 11,000 or so. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about doing the, the CUDA drivers or anything like that right now, just for the purpose of saving time in this video and whatnot. But yeah, you can just install those, download them, love them. And yeah, so actually it got more than I thought. That's with a 32-bit test. We got 12,255. So definitely not a slouch. I mean, you can overclock this processor a full gigahertz, maybe even more. And you can see that score jump to like 18, possibly 19,000. So definitely something to keep in mind. This processor is no slouch.
Yeah.
No slouch at all. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to run multi-beast here. And what's really nice about this board, there's no DSDT required or anything like that. This board is just absolutely awesome for OS X. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the DSDT and or non-DSDT free, or the DSDT free installation. And one thing that people confuse with EasyBeast and non-DSDT free is the power management. If you do EasyBeast, then you can actually see right here, null CPU power management is actually installed, which will disable your system's ability to adjust to your CPU load, and your temperatures will always be constant. Your CPU frequency will always be maxed out, therefore possibly reducing the life of your CPU. So as long as you have a compatible motherboard and CPU like we have here, then just stick with this and you won't have any problems. But so what we're going to do now is we're going to install audio. So we're not using a DSTT. We're going to install ALC 887, do the current version. Disk, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a trim enabler. And right now, at this point, there's only a 10.8.3 trim patch, but I believe that also 8.4.
That's what happened.
Let's see here. Hopefully you guys can see this a bit better. Network, I'm not even going to worry about right now, but if my memory suits me well, we're going to need... I think it's the Atheros driver for this board. So I think it's going to be Atheros. I could be wrong about that because this is all just off the top of my head right now. But like I said earlier, I do have a hackintosh hardware video on my channel with this particular motherboard that will tell you exactly what you need. But I do believe it is Atheros because I think it has an Intel Ethernet chipset. So system, we don't have to worry about. You can mess with your boot options, your system definition if you want to. Personally, I'm not going to. And we're just going to continue. Put in that extremely secure password of ours. And this should only take a second. And then once this is done, we're going to reboot the system. And to prove the point that the bootloader is now installed to the hard drive, once we reboot, I'm actually going to take out the UniBeast drive, and we should be booting without any worries. So we're going to restart. Now, actually, we have one last step before we're, up and running home free. And once we get to our little Chimera screen, actually, we do have to boot with a kernel flag, and that is graphics enabler equals no. I know you guys can't see that very well right now. We'll put up a lower third in the YouTube version here, and so you can see what that command looks like. But the reason we need that is because when we install the DSDT or non-DSDT install, in our boot.plist file, what that does is it sets our graphics enabler to yes. And now since we're using an NVIDIA card of the 600 series, it requires it to be no. So if you boot up, you're going to see a white screen, which is not good. So now that we booted with graphics enabler set to no, we actually see our display here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to open up a Finder window. And actually what you can do is you can hit Command comma on the desktop, and you can show your hard disks. And now you can drag this into here freely. But so now what you want to do is go to the root of the drive you're on. Now open up your extra folder. And you'll see an org.chameleon.boot.plist. What you want to do is open this with TextEdit. And now you can see the line that we're going to look for right here. Graphics enabler, the string is set to yes. All we have to do is simply go back, set it to no with a capital N, save it, and now we can reboot without the need of any kernel flags whatsoever. So now we're going to reboot. Further proof that the flash drive is right here, no tricks or shenanigans. So now we have the little purr kitty cat. And now we should be home free. And there we go at the OS X desktop, booting from the solid-state drive all by itself. And once again, keep in mind that this is with this hardware that I have. Your installation process could be totally different. Yours could be a lot more of a pain in the neck. But if you have a board that's not the DS3H, go ahead and check out my YouTube channel and see if I have a Hackintosh hardware series all about it, in which those videos will tell you what kernel flags you need, what works, what doesn't work, anything you guys need to know. If I've covered your board, then you'll be up and running with that board in no time. Alright guys, well there you have it. That was the live Hackintosh build today. I'm sure we're going to think of a clever name for this, but thank you guys very much for coming by in the chat, coming by live. We were consistently at like 100 to 150 concurrent viewers, so thank you guys very much for that. And it's because, like I said at the beginning of this video, it's because of you guys that this actually made it onto YouTube. Your guys' support means the world to me, and I hope you guys really enjoyed yourself. And also thank you extremely much, if that even makes sense, I'm very hot right now, to Dontae and Terrell for being with us for like 3 hours on the stream. Don't know what we'd do without you guys. Huge thanks to our producer, Terrell Clark, oneplacefortech.com, oneplaceforapple.com. Be sure to check out all of his work. Much more on that coming soon. Stay tuned to the channel. But as Dontae was saying, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything about the stream, we do want to hear from you. I have a contact form on my website. There's a comment section down below. You can get at us on Twitter. There's many different ways for you guys to let us know what you want. And like I said just a few minutes ago, a direct result of that was this video making it onto the internet and to the YouTubes. So thank you guys very much for joining us. Me personally, check out RocheTechnology.com. I'm at CPUKid on Twitter. And if you are interested in having me build you a computer like this, possibly even live in front of an audience just like this, then definitely check out RocheTechnology.com/customize. And if there isn't a configuration there that fits your needs, I also just do a flat up request a computer service, where we can really go back and forth on a very specific set of hardware and get you going that way. Or even if you just want to build a computer yourself, but you just need an idea for what hardware, I also have a service for that too. So thank you guys very much for watching. We hope to see you back on the channel here very soon.